Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our special meeting of council, Thursday, March 30th, 2023 at 6 p.m. And we are hybrid with Midland Council in chambers. I think we have everybody present with the exception of Councillor Downer, who I know has a darn good reason. He's home recovering. But we also are joined this evening by our shared councils in Penetanguishene and in Tiny Township, our shareholder partners of the Huronia Regional Airport. And the first part of this meeting, we're all together to see a presentation from the Huronia Airport Commission and to discuss a motion that will be on the floor. And the debate will happen while we're all together. And then procedurally, we'll all break off to our own respective councils, meaning our two partners will disconnect from the stream. We'll take a little break, get everyone onto their own Zoom links, and the voting will happen outside of this meeting because we can't all collectively do business and do voting together. So it's a neat, supremely hybrid format, and it just happens that it's being hosted here in Midland. So I guess I'm lucky enough to be the chair of this meeting. So I will call it to order now and just start with our traditional land acknowledgement that the town of Midland recognizes that it's located on land which is the traditional and treaty territory of the Anishinaabe people, now known as the Chippewa Tri-Council, comprised of Beausoleil First Nation, Rama First Nation, and the Georgina Island First Nation. This territory is within the Pre-Confederation Treaty 5 and Treaty 16 and included within the Williams Treaties of 1923. The town of Midland recognizes that it's located on land which is in the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and historic homelands of the Métis, and that our town is home to a large and diverse community of Indigenous peoples. I'd also like to deliver the following safety message for the folks that are in our gallery today. First of all, welcome. Should the fire alarm activate, please exit the room in an orderly fashion and proceed to the evacuation assembly area, which is located in the upper parking lot. You may exit through the main entrance and make an immediate left and proceed out the front doors, or through the secondary exit. Up the stairs, you check the door for heat before opening, and if it's safe, exit onto the second floor, turning right and proceed out the doors in front of you. The washrooms, if you need them, are located on the second floor to the left of the seating area, and an elevator is located just outside of the main entrance. As Midland has a respectful workplace policy, anyone that exhibits violent or harassing behavior will be asked to leave. And regarding recording of this meeting, council meetings are recorded via Zoom and are posted to the town's YouTube site. These meetings are also broadcast on Rogers TV Midland Channel 53. So I'll say hello to our folks in TV land. Having gotten out of the way, we move to our declarations of conflict of interest. This will be a request of all three of our councils. And with Penetanguishene, I have one camera view, and I know you're there, but you look a little small. So if you could raise your hands for me, or perhaps have your CAO wave his hand in front of the camera if anyone needs to signal that they need to speak. Just ask all councils if there are any declarations of conflict of interest regarding tonight's matter. Seeing none, I have a motion here moved by Midland Councillor Emeritus, seconded by Midland Councillor Bald, that the contents of the special meeting of council agenda for March 30th be approved. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Any opposed? And that is carried. All right, up next, we have a presentation, item 4.1. It's the Huronia Airport Commission joint presentation, a request to sell a portion of land on the Huronia Airport property. And I have Mr. Roy Ellis to present to councils of the town of Midland, the town of Penetanguishene, and the township of Tiny. On conclusion of the presentation, all of our councils for the town of Penetanguishene and township of Tiny will convene in their separate meetings to consider the request. However, as I alluded to in the beginning, the debate, if any, around the motion, which is a fairly lengthy one, will happen while we're convened jointly. And that's the purpose of this joint session. So with that, I'd like to invite Mr. Ellis to the podium, and we'll get the camera configured and the SharePoint ready to go.
Thank you very much, Mayor Gordon. Can everybody hear me okay? Excuse me. This technology is intimidating. I retired many years ago because I couldn't embrace all this technology. So I guess I got to learn it real quick. So thanks for your support, Sarah, and the IT team for what you're about to do to make us hopefully look good this evening. So good evening, members of council, staff, and residents from the three airport owner municipalities of Midland, Penetanguishene, and Tiny, where of course the airport resides. On behalf of the Airport Commission, thank you for the opportunity for us to present this evening relevant information supporting your commission's formal request to sell a portion of the airport's developmental land to support the airport's future capital needs. I should mention that is employment lands as well. With me today is our airport manager, Zachary Premate. Also with us via the miracles of Zoom is our aviation consultant, Stephen Wilcox, who among other responsibilities and accountabilities manages the Oshawa Executive Airport. Next slide, please. A few brief words, if I may, on the commission structure. The Airport Commission is comprised of 3 council members, 1 appointed from each owner municipality, and 4 community reps, 2 from Midland and 1 each from Tiny and Penetanguishene. The Huronia Airport Commission also has a working committee known as the Huronia Airport Task Force. We affectionately call this the HAT team, and they provide ongoing support and rich feedback for which committee I actually chair. HAT is comprised of senior staff from each of the owner municipalities to include your CAOs, Tiny's planner, Don Cooper, who's a resident from Penetanguishene, and Stephen Wilcox, our aviation planning consultant. Tiny's planner is key because any and all development which happens at the airport should fly in formation with Tiny's planning policy. From a governance perspective, the HAT committee reports into the Huronia Airport Commission, and that is why the request to sell a portion of land came directly to its owners from the commission itself. Next slide, please. The tri-party agreement is the agreement the ownership group of Midland, Tiny, and Penetanguishene entered into, and essentially lays out governance matters, the authority of the commission, and includes financial and operations related matters. With respect to the ownership model, Midland owns 50% of the asset, Penetanguishene 28%, and the township of Tiny 22%. And a key piece to the agreement is that the commission holds title to the land. So the title to the land is held by the Airport Commission and has authority to lease said land to prospective tenants. But with that said, we have no authority to sell land. It's the expressed authority, collective authority of the 3 owner municipalities. Next slide, please, sir. Federal supremacy, just very quickly on this. Aerodromes, airports basically have what we call federal supremacy. It means that it's a regulated body for both land use and for adhering to Canadian aviation standards, we refer to as CARS, which dictates both safety and security requirements. After saying that, we work closely, as mentioned before, with Tiny Planning, their operations people, fire services, to name but a few departments, for the benefit of the broader community. Next slide. Lumex executive summary. This is how it all began about 3 years ago, and this is our journey. And there has been many critical dates and gates, for that matter, along the way, checkpoints, if you wish. So in 2019, and I think this context is very, very important. In 2019, the 3 councils of the day collectively retained Lumex to conduct a comprehensive business review guided by the deliverables highlighted on the slide. I'm advised the final Lumex report has been shared and made available to all members of council. Shortly after receiving the report, the Airport Commission, in tandem with Lumex, and I remember Mayor Gordon was there, hosted an all-owner information meeting of council at the airport for the purpose of reviewing its findings and conclusions in the context of defining next steps. Following this meeting, all 3 councils individually motioned to strike a working committee known as the Huronia Airport Task Force, which I previously mentioned. Next slide, please. Collective councils provided HAT with clear terms of reference, which included 6 key objectives ranging from governance, economic development, financial and operational considerations, the task of identifying short, mid, and long-term priorities, along with providing a strategic roadmap by year-end 2021, some 15 months ago. Next slide, please. So our journey, building on the Lumex report, the foundational report in 2019, your commission and HAT retained the services of WSP, a global engineering firm and an airport consulting firm. Their mandate was to review and validate Lumex's findings and update the airport development survey plan, which was a very tired and dated document, which was first conceived sometime back in the 90s. HAT then submitted to respective councils their final written report year-end 2021, following which your commission retained the services of Stephen Wilcox, who's joining us this evening, to assist us with executing our roadmap and importantly, to provide critical performance data on Oshawa's journey over the last 15 years or so for our benchmark purposes. Again, Steve will join us in a few slides from now. In spring 2022, the three owner municipalities provided the airport with $60,000 to complete a draft survey of the lands and buildings located on the lands. This survey has become our North Star for future development. Notwithstanding our authority to sell land or not sell land, we have to have a plan, we have to have a vision, and that has become our vision. So money well spent. Said differently, it was an essential piece in moving development forward, both responsibly and strategically, and is foundational to entering the registered R-Plan stage. You may recall during council orientation and budget session meetings, which followed the recent election, the commission referenced an all-council meeting, which was held in the spring of 2022. One key recommendation which did not get decided with previous councils was the issue around the authority for the Airport Commission to sell specified land. That brings us now to the motion. Next slide, please. And so we don't need to read all that, but effectively the motion was delivered to all three councils saying that your commission, which includes councilors and community reps, would like authority to sell some land. Next slide, please. Now that we fully appreciate the comprehensive journey, we should refresh ourselves with the significant assets and key attributes of the airport. Now, thinking about key assets, we enjoy 350 acres of land, which speaks to an enormous development opportunity, given airport operations likely only requires 1/3 of that amount. And a little more on that later on. The terminal building is still impressive, to use Zach's words, and we enjoy, call it a 4,000-foot runway, which is comparable to Buttonville and Toronto Island, which has been in the news of late for being a very efficient airport, you might have read. The airport owns several buildings to include 2 green hangars, they're basically skin hangars, which houses upwards of 14 planes, 2 commercial hangars, which are leased to aviation partners, and a bank of T hangars, which includes 7 hangars in that bank. The T hangars were built after receiving a higher level FedEv government grant some 7 years ago. They are the gift that keeps on giving, as each year we generate $42K in revenue. In total, when you add in the 30 general aviation private hangars, we're just shy of 100,000 square feet of private and commercial hangar space. Our aviator customers enjoy a brand new state-of-the-art fuel system, thanks to the 3 owner municipalities who collectively supported the purchase of a safer and more efficient above-ground fueling system 2 years ago. We have a host of supporting equipment assets, as our small but mighty staff are charged with snow clearing, lawn maintenance, and a host of other activities. And finally, your airport is a valued community partner. Next slide, please. The headline clearly is the airport's important role in providing emergency services support, namely 16 medevac flights in support of GBGH, 48 police, and 8 military movements. In fact, when I was out there today, there was Hydro One on 2 occasions, fueling up, dealing with emergency issues as a result of the storm that passed by yesterday. Some of you may not know that LCAN uses our facility to support their leading edge research, as our vast open space is ideal for their visionary purposes. Among many other worthy causes and benefits listed on the slide, we have a new partner in which called upon your airport to support local gypsy moth operations. Next slide, please. So testimonials from a few folks that you would know. Gail Hunt, former CEO of GBGH and now CEO of RVH, explains in a letter that during inclement weather, our GPS technology capabilities allows Orange to navigate safely, transporting emergency trauma patients. Homatine, the CEO of Orange, echoes her statements and sentiments. Catherine Rowe Bailey, the general manager of LCAN, reinforces the strong partnership LCAN has with the airport. LCAN is also one of the largest employers in North Simcoe, with a huge employment and economic footprint, as you all know. And finally, Matt Hines, the president of Zen Air, who employs approximately 20 skilled laborers, is appreciative of the value of the airport as it provides Zen Air with their ability to test innovations, and they're often tried and proven at the airport, and their successful products then shipped all over the world, right here from North Simcoe. And this is real economic development, meaning innovation happening locally, raw materials sourced locally, skilled labor from the local catchment, yet revenue is predominantly collected from other geographies. At this point in time, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Stephen Wilcox, our only other speaker, who I might add, we continue to steal their learnings and best practices shamelessly. Stephen will tell Oshawa Executive Airport story of how they embrace the notion to sell land in a managed and thoughtful way to respond to their elephant in the room, namely the capital burden on the municipality. Stephen has a wealth of aviation experience as a pilot, manager of multiple airport operations, decades of experience developing strategic plans, chairing ad hoc NAV Canada committees, and the list goes on. So without further ado, Steve, please take us through Oshawa's journey. Next slide, please.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for allowing me to join you via Zoom. I'm actually at an aviation conference looking at new aviation technologies as we speak, along with operating the Oshawa Airport, so Total Aviation Airport Solutions. We operate and manage the Oshawa Airport. I've also had a role chairing the Airport Management Council of Ontario, which is our Association of Ontario Airports. I've chaired the NAV Canada Advisory Committee, and NAV Canada operates all of the control towers and manages all of the aircraft movements into and out of airports and in and out of our country. I also currently sit on the Canadian Airports Council and am involved in their governance review at a national level, because that's our role as part of a North American network. And all of that really to say, I've seen a lot of airports, both here in Canada, the US, as well as globally. Everything from small grass strips, municipally operated grass strips, I might add, to the larger airports, including Toronto, Pearson, Chicago, LA, the big hubs. So seen a lot of different airports. Keeping in mind the role of infrastructure, and that's really the important piece. Roy touched on that with the medevac flights that you have, and we have many here in Oshawa as well. And airports are key infrastructure. That's a really key piece. And within that infrastructure model, one of the guiding principles, you're doing an excellent job with it there at your airport, and we certainly do here, and that is the strategy to maximize airport revenue consistent with industry practices in order to reduce net operating costs to the greatest extent possible. I want to say that again because it's a really, really important piece of the puzzle. And that is, again, the goal is to maximize the airport revenue consistent with industry practices in order to reduce net operating costs to the greatest extent possible. So with that in mind, here in Oshawa back in 2008, our council approved the sale of airport land with three real key components or goals of that strategy. One was, it was utilizing the land sale proceeds to offset airport capital costs. Roy mentioned it early, capital costs are a key component or key needed airports. The land sale revenue helps us to do that. Secondly, it allowed us to create serviced employment lands for aviation and non-aviation land. And if you look at the image there, you can see above what we call the North Field, you can see some blue buildings and that little block that looks like it's cut away from the airport. And that is actually former airport land, still considered part of the airport. And those are non-aviation applications across there. The road running east and west is Taunton Road, a main artery. So we chose to create some non-aviation land as well. It also gave us a great competitive advantage over other airports that are asking tenants or owners to establish major facilities on leased land. And so anywhere that a business is looking to move a business, the typical model is you buy some land, you move into a building or you build a building and you own the building and land along with that. Airports for many years had an antiquated model that said, we want you to lease the land and then try to explain that to your bank so you can get funding to build a building. Where businesses understand conventional business decision wisdom, which is to own the building, own the property, and then operate your business from it. So it really gave us a competitive advantage. I will say that a number of airports have modeled us, and of course, that's what we're talking about for you here today. The other thing to keep in mind in our case, because we have a long-standing agreement with Transport Canada, is any land sales have to be consistent with our Transport Canada agreements. And Transport Canada has always approved our land sales because they like the idea of the airport land going in to sort out capital needs. So great strategy. If we could have the next slide, please. So this is our airport back in 2008 when we started this strategy. And we actually started this strategy many years before, did all of the same kind of studies that you did with the LUMAX report, with the WSP report. And this was our first draft of our airport land sale. And essentially, this is where we are today with your R-Plan survey, or with the geographic survey that's been done for your airport. And you'll see back in 2008, we had a single hangar on lot 1. We had another hangar on lot 9. We had a complex down there on lot 16. The lot 18s were T hangars. You heard Roy talking about T hangars. That's where private aircraft would go. And we had the blue complex up on Taunton Road. But the rest was basically vacant land at that time. So much the same model that you have today, where you have some activity, which is great. And this strategy looking at really creating more and using that. And all of these were under land lease at that time in 2008. Next slide, please. So this is where we are today. Very, very different picture in our 15-year history with land sales. Inside the red box, what we call our north field, you can see almost all of our properties have been sold. And the remaining properties, we actually have offers in place, and we're moving through that process to advance those land sales. And of course, across Taunton Road, all that land that we said is created as non-aviation employment land. There's one little block of trees to the left of the blue hangar boxes, or blue storage boxes as they were. And there's actually a hotel and a conference center being built on that as we speak. The bulldozers are there, they're digging up the ground, and it will have 3-story underground parking included at it, because property is of great value in Oshawa. So lots of advances and very large hangars. I'm going to talk about the numbers in just a moment for you. But you can see, again, we took that land strategy and we envisioned where we wanted to go, and we enabled the airport through the support of council to be able to position itself to sell these lands for employment and non-employment strategies. If I work across that strategy, lot 1, all the way really across to lot 12, 14, that kind of block, those are all of our employment lands. All of the businesses there operate with staff in place. And the box, which is lot 18 and lot 17, that's a large complex, 2 separate complexes of basically what are private aircraft operators. So they may be businesses operating their aircraft for private use, or they'll be private aircraft owners. And so a lot changed in 15 years with that strategy. Could I have the next slide, please? When we look at the numbers, this really tells the story. And I believe you're at the cusp of being able to tell a similar story with your airport. So if we looked in 2008, we had 85 aircraft. And today we have over 250 aircraft. In terms of corporate flights, we always measure our corporate traffic. That's our medevacs. That's business moving in and out of our community. And back in 2008, we had roughly 300 flights. Today, that's about 5,000 a year. These are annual numbers. In terms of businesses, we had 3 aviation businesses. Today, we have 18 thriving aviation businesses. We had 3 non-aviation businesses. So there was that blue box area you could see, as well as 2 others that were on another portion of the property. Today, we have over 12 non-aviation businesses. In terms of aircraft movements, so anytime an aircraft takes off or lands, that's called an aircraft movement. And back in 2008, we had about 60,000 movements. 2022, we saw 96,000 movements. And so that's a good number for us. And we float between 75 and 95,000 movements a year. A lot has to do with weather and, of course, things called COVID, right? Hangar space, back then we started with about 45,000 square feet of hangar space. Today we have over 400,000 square feet of hangar space. Property tax is a really interesting number. Again, all of that aviation land, including the non-aviation commercial land along Taunton Road, only generated about $385,000 a year in property tax. Today, that's $1.7 million. Over $1.7 million. And that, of course, is split with the region and with the school board. So the city of Oshawa doesn't get to keep all of it, but certainly a big change there. In terms of GDP, And we, back in 2008 was about 58 million. Today, we're really in excess of about 100 million. And if we talk about full-time employment equivalents as part of that GDP, you're also looking at the full-time jobs. We're in that range of really 350 to 400 full-time equivalent jobs at the airport. Today, one of our aviation businesses alone has 150 people. We add Nav Canada to that, and quickly that's 200 direct right there. So the numbers grow very quickly. Once you enable business to do what business does, and again, selling land is a really key component of that. In terms of cost to the ratepayer, remember I said the goal is to minimize the burden on the ratepayers to the greatest extent possible. And so back in 2008, for us, that was $4.70 per each ratepayer, and that excluded the benefit of the property tax. Today, we look at that, it's $2.32, and again, that excludes the benefit of the property tax. Really, the key message here is that when airport activity increases, and expenses are managed strategically and very carefully, and such as selling land to meet the capital needs, the ratepayer benefits. And again, I want to say that, I want to repeat it because it's worth repeating, is when aircraft activity increases and expenses are managed strategically, such as the sale of land for capital, the ratepayers benefit. And we're seeing that example played out significantly here in Oshawa. And again, I believe that's you're sitting on the cusp of that. Next slide, please. When we look a little bit more closely at that cost per ratepayer and look at where your peers are in Ontario, and that's what we did here with this slide. The slide on the right is a slide that I prepared for our council to show them where we were in comparison to our peers. And so if we look at your peers, and let's look at Huronia first. And so total GDP about a little under 3.5 million, about 30 full-time equivalent jobs. But the really telling number down at the bottom is a cost of about $3.43 per ratepayer. And that's an exceptionally good. When we move over to the chart on the right, we're going to see when we compare it, the Peterborough Airport at a cost of almost $18 per ratepayer. Kingston, they do a really good job, have some scheduled passenger service down there to help with that at $3.56. Muskoka, not very far from you, 17, just almost under 18. Lake Simcoe Airport, sort of the shining star of your area up there at $7. And of course, at $3.43, your star shining much brighter than even Simcoe to the south. Niagara District, again, another blossoming airport with some sched service in there at $3.40. Waterloo at $3.05, again, a large sched service operation in there supporting it. Scheduled passenger service, you know, get on an airplane and fly to Florida sort of thing, in case you weren't familiar with the term I was using. And Oshawa at $2.32. I'm quite proud to say that no one beats us in Oshawa. All of that, again, really important piece. And when we think of an airport like infrastructure, right? Like a road, in this case, the runway is infrastructure. And again, think of it like a road, except this road will take your child to Sick Kids Hospital in 40 minutes. That's why it's there, folks. It's that 50 medevac flights, right? And if you're one of the 50 people, and I hope that none of you are, we hope that none of us are, especially our family and our friends and our kids, but that's really what it's all about, being able to make sure we meet that very important infrastructure need. And it's also really important, Roy touched on this, but ever so briefly in the comment from your former director there of the hospital, is that in that bad weather, that's when they're coming to the airport. The helicopters don't land at helipads in the middle of a bad weather event. They land at the airport, they bring the ambulance to the airport, and they fly out from there. And bad things happen to good people, especially in bad weather, folks. That's when accidents happen. That's when the majority of the trauma flights take place. So very important role that the airport serves. Next slide, please. And I believe this is my last slide. And again, I really want to stress this, is that the social and economic benefits significantly exceed the social and economic costs. That's what this really all means for you today with your airport. Today for us with Oshawa is that the social and economic benefits significantly exceed the social costs. That's why it's there, is continuing to make sure it meets this model. It very much does today. We'll continue to do so by enabling the land sales to help you with your capital issues at the airport. Thank you for listening to me. I'll certainly be hanging on at the end for questions. And with that, Roy, I'm happy to pass the presentation back over to you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. On behalf of the folks on this call, we'd like to thank you for your valuable insights. You've been a tremendous partner as we attempt to navigate through the strategic roadmap process and define the size of the development opportunity. I'm sure councilors on the call will have several questions directed at you. So please, to use an aviation term, hold short, don't go away, okay? So next slide, please. The capital asset management plan. A few brief comments on this slide as it's clearly driving the strategy. Just a few months ago, we requested capital funding for a snow blower, which we needed to purchase last fall. Your commission at the time looked at the political landscape. This was around October, around the election cycle, the essential service that we provide and the authority we had as a commission to borrow money. We were in the middle of an election, as I mentioned. There was one blower left in Canada that could meet our needs and adapt to our current loader. So we made a tough but necessary call. The commission voted 7-0 to go ahead with the purchase, which now resides on our books as a loan. I believe this expenditure is now approved by all three owner municipalities, but I'm sure you'll all agree it was a challenged journey for all involved when we reflect upon this year's inaugural budget process. As you can see on the slide, we have future equipment needs as several of these assets are near end of life. If we have the means, we can also build new infrastructure, such as the hangars and the T hangar I mentioned, which generates $40K a year. And that will generate revenue and in time will reduce our operating ask of the owner municipalities, similar to the model you just saw in Oshawa. The next slide is the WSP, I call it eye chart. I'm sorry, but it's the only way we could get that up there, but I know that you all have one on your computer. We apologize for this, but I want you to see sort of the third thoughtful journey that we underwent to get to this point. Basically, we're concerning ourselves with the top of the screen, which is what we call East Side development. And we've got a little pointer, and I apologize, we only have it on the one slide to my left. And that is the area that we're talking about developing, the 61.4 acres. And you can see if you come on the south here, which is really the west side, we've got some wetland things happening and we don't have services coming in, road access and those types of things. So we're not concerning ourselves this evening with that discussion. We have bifurcated that down the road because it's very complicated. Slide 20, please, next slide. So as I mentioned, 61.4 acres. So Zach and I sort of worked this slide up a little bit just to help you hone in on what the opportunities are. And we color-coded this slide. So for reference, again, the top is east and the runway runs north and south. So on the left is north and on the right is south. And the runway is oriented 3-4, which is almost dead north, is 20 degrees off north. So that's on my left side. So the runway is about 4,000 feet where Zach is pointing. And if you go up to the orange, you'll see access to the runway, and we call that taxiway Bravo. Now, if we look to the left, the blue area, well, for those of you who have been to the airport, the terminal and the entrance is all on the left side, which is the north side, and the parking lot and some of the hangars. The area in blue is our current GA area, which houses 30 aircraft hangars. And that's what you would call general aviation, private pilots, those types of things. That's already being developed, and we get 1 or 2 folks a year on our current business model that decide to invest and grow their business or their personal aviation preferences at the airport. The second area is the expansion for GA. That would house probably another 30 to 40 hangars, private hangars. Obviously, it depends on the size that's built. We have hangars that are 30 by 35. We have hangars that are 45 by 60. And a lot depends on the size of the plane, the needs of the pilots, and so on and so forth. So that is the GA part, which equals about 10 acres. Okay, and it all runs development north to south, organically, strategically. We're not going to have little pieces where some guy pops up over there, and then we've got to worry about a road. We're actually going to put that burden on the developer. So utilities and services that are coming into the airport, the road, there's a road, if you could show the road, Zach, that's a service road that needs to be taken up to speed. And if I could just show you an indent there, Zach, just to the right, that's 7th concession. Just point out 7th concession, which is Tiny. Tiny owns that, obviously. So if you follow me now on the left, and we actually have a letter of intent from an investor, a future investor, who last fall, we have the ability, as I mentioned, we have the ability and the authority to lease land. We offered them a lease of 6 of those acres, and there's 7.6 acres there. The investor basically turned around and said, hey, a 25,000 square foot hangar is going to cost me $5 million. You want me to bring the road up to speed? You want me to develop the taxiway Bravo South adjacent to runway 34 this way? And that dog won't hunt. I mean, that's basically the conversation. $5 million for a hangar on leased land for 20 years, and I have to put in all the services. So they turned around, they got their legal advice, and they sent us an offer to purchase 6 acres of land. And I really appreciate, I know you've got lots on your plate, but in very short order, you've been able to convene this meeting because they were time bound on this. They're doing operations already in Sudbury. They have a base there. You probably heard of the organization. We call it Geo Park, but it's really the Ring of Fire. And it's that whole electrification play, minerals, et cetera. And the principal owns about 62% of the rights in the north for that whole play, that whole category. So that's a really, really a big part of why we're here this evening. If you follow the blue down, let's say that person gobbles up the 6 acres, all of a sudden, and if we create some excitement and what the heck is going on at Huronia, now we need to talk about the other aviation commercial. So aviation commercial, again, is disciplined, the yellow and the blue that just goes down adjacent to the east side of the runway. Now, if we reflect on what Stephen said, if you go, it's actually it's east of the service road, but for your purposes, it's to the top of the screen. That's where we want to put the non-aviation commercial development. And funny enough, yesterday, Zach got a call from electrical company that wants to relocate, and his brother apparently is a pilot. I don't have all the details. I've been sort of worried about this, but there is a lot of interest, and maybe it's social media right now. Maybe people know we're having this meeting, but there's a lot of interest to develop, or at least to talk about development. I never say anything till they sign the deal. So that's on the north side or the east side, but on the north of your screen. And that gobbles up about 22 or 23 acres. That is not our priority. I will tell you that right now. We are an airport. We are in the aviation business for all the reasons that we talked about. But we don't want to turn that away either, because those people will help develop the service road along the way and create that connectivity and drive greater capital. So should council agree that this sale and this authority makes sense, the owner municipalities will be provided with regular reporting on activity along with annual budget updates, which will include new and pending sales. You enjoy a strong governance model, with the commission being comprised of 4 community reps, 2 mayors sit on the commission, a deputy mayor, and the HAC committee regularly engages your CAOs and Tiny's planner. So they're watching the money, and that group will be making the decision on any sale of land if that authority is so given. While we don't have a current valuation of 1 acre of land, several years ago, Tiny's planner of record estimated the value in the range of $155,000 per acre. So quick math suggests the size of the opportunity is in the range of $7 to $10 million. Next slide, please. Now about leads. I've already touched on this, so I won't repeat myself, but we've got an AME, they're called aircraft mechanic, wants to set up a shop. Flight school, GA hangars already talked about. We get phone calls like weekly. Modular homes. We had somebody that wanted to build a prefab homes basically and approached us. But again, most people, they don't want to lease and make that size of investment. And they can't even get the money sometimes from the bank. Everyone knows how banking works. It's better to own the land, that's for sure. HVAC, there's a company that called us from Brampton. Their lease is up in the next 3 years. They want to relocate. Storage, distillery, I could go on and on and on. But I think you get the drift. And as I mentioned, this electrician or electrical company and a brother who's an aviator contacted us just recently. So I've already pretty well covered off the Geo Park 6-acre play. Again, we offered them a lease. They turned around and said, we don't want a lease, we want to buy. And if we're going to buy, we're going to do it by the end of March or April. The Ford government's committed $1 billion, I guess, to build road and infrastructure up north for their company. And they want to use this, our hub, as what they call a Geo Park. Geo Park is looking at several other airport hub opportunities. Like all prudent investors do, they shop around. The sale of land, which would be conditional on them supplying services, as I mentioned, which is road access and utilities, et cetera, and commencing construction by a mutually agreed upon date. This isn't about selling land and sitting on it for 10 years. This is about selling land and putting a shovel in the ground quickly. Okay, so we would put a clause in any and all agreements to that effect. And obviously we need help from CAOs and directors of planning and legal and some of the other assets that that you guys obviously have. And you may have to look at the airport commission at some point in terms of capability. You know, do you need to add new talent because you'll be evolving a little bit from an operating company of safe and efficient flight to a little bit of a development company. So it's two hats, two things going on here at the same time, but mutually inclusive. So I mentioned the cost of a 25,000 square foot hangar, approximately $5 million. We haven't even put a pen to the infrastructure, bringing hydro in and bringing, septic systems and all the other stuff. But you can hazard a guess it's, who knows, $7-8 million bucks. So that's why people want to buy and control their occupancy costs in this particular case. Next slide, please, and then I'll take a breath. Basically, next steps. Well, Geo Center Air Park. Sorry, I missed a slide, but this is the offer that I just talked about, and they're looking for a decision, obviously, in the spring. And we mentioned this before. And again, thank you for being here this evening because this is a tough decision. You've got many balls to juggle and many challenges ahead of you. And this is, I see this though as just a great opportunity. This is something that's going to fall in our lap and can take the elephant out of our room, which is capital, off the table. If we get it right and when we get it right. So next slide, please, Sarah. All right, so provide the Huronia Airport Commission with the authority to sell airport land for the purpose of supporting the airport's capital need. That's the next step, basically, and that will be handled, as Mayor Gordon said, immediately following this, and you'll get to say yay or nay. Commercial real estate evaluation. We're not current with that valuation I gave you, the 155K. We need to get that updated from a commercial realtor. We would advance the R plan to registration, which is basically knowing where everything is. And if you're buying something, what am I buying? And that matters. Right now, it's throwing darts. Prepare sale and purchase agreements, obviously, and then make prudent use of the airport capital. Build a box, freedom within a framework, and allow your commission to make those decisions on what matters to the airport. So I think that is about it, Mr. Mayor. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ellis, Mr. Wilcox, for the presentations. And just a procedural clarification, the discussion or Q&A, if you were, about the subject matter that we just heard will be done collectively with our guest councils and partners present. But the debate around the motion itself and the voting, so the debate and the voting will happen independently with each council. So I think I misspoke earlier. I just wanted to clarify procedurally that it's the group presentation that we're sharing together, availing ourselves of the ability for Q&A to make sure we are, got all the information we need to break off and have our own debate as independent councils and partners. And then the voting happens at our independent council. So just setting the stage there. So our question and answer period now. I'll open it up to counselors and our guest counselors as well. If you're remote, if you could use the little hand feature in Zoom, that would be very helpful because that'll bring you to the middle of my screen. And locally here, I'll easily see your hand, and we'll try and keep our questions focused on this presentation and not about the ask per se, unless it's just clarifying questions, because we are going to debate that ourselves in the more formal section. And there will be reps from our presentation available to each of the three councils for our internal debates. So that way, if we have questions about the mechanics or the ask, we can do that independently and still avail ourselves of the expert team that are guiding us along on this. So there's the preamble out of the way, and who'd like to go first? I'm totally missing the little yellow hand. Somebody from Town of Pentangwisheen, I believe, has got a question. Please go ahead. And perhaps our IT could double click or whatever we need to do to bring that little box to the stage. Maybe make it a bit easier to see because it is a big wide shot over there.
Thank you, Mayor Gordon. From the Town of Pentangwisheen, we have no questions inside our chambers at this time.
Very good. Sorry to challenge IT with that. Any other questions? Or a question? Councillor Meredith, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Gordon. This is a question for Mr. Stephen Wilcox. Mr. Wilcox, and you mentioned, well, first of all, from 2008 to 2022, your airport has expanded quite nicely and grown. The one question I have is, right now, Oshawa is $2.32 per person. With the amount of growth you had, I would assume that the 232 would be down to a net zero. I'm just wondering why. And I see every airport is somehow somewhat funded by the taxpayers. So that 232 obviously is impressive in the airport business. Just wondering why that, or can we achieve a net zero? Is that even achievable? So that's my question, if you could answer that one.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. It's a great question, and I get asked it all the time. And the challenge is this, or the piece of it is to recognize that the airport is infrastructure. So there are many activities that will take place at the airport that is operating on the basis of its community involvement. And so the medevacs are a great example. So if you have to call a plumber to your house on a Sunday afternoon, you're going to pay him triple time. But through the day, maybe less. But either way, you're going to charge him. And if we think about a medevac in a purely revenue-driven model, if you move the airport to a purely revenue-driven model, you're going to charge everybody every time they land, and you're going to charge that medevac in the middle of a snowstorm 3 times the rate. So the minute we recognize it as an infrastructure where there are huge community benefits from a number of the activities, then, and it's why it's consistent across the industry, why there's always that cost, is because it looks at that piece and says, you know what, we're not going to charge the ambulance 3 times the cost in a snowstorm. In fact, we may not even charge them. There are lots of users that are direct benefit. We have the police at ours. We have a lot of medevac flights. Of course, we have Orange Air Ambulance there that you may not even charge. And so in the infrastructure module, you're really looking at what's in the best interest of the community and how do we minimize that revenue. And that's really why that's the case, is you're always going to have some costs because it's infrastructure. It's like a road. And even where we have, and especially where we have essential service, there's always going to be a slight cost. Now you're driving that cost down to the greatest extent possible, but it's really recognizing it as infrastructure in much the same way you support the operation of any of your other necessary pieces of infrastructure. You're going to derive some revenue from the users. You know, the kids hockey are going to pay, but they're not probably paying their proportionate share if you were trying to cover 100% of the cost to operate your arena. but you're going to make sure that that community benefit, that social and economic benefit exceeds the social and economic costs. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thanks. We'll go next to Councillor Walma from Tiny.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I have one question. I guess it pertains to the process moving forward. I am excited at the concept. I think there's some real opportunity here. Selling land often includes negotiations, multiple offers, back and forths, that kind of thing. And I'm not sure who the question is to, but how do we see this negotiation process working? Would it be multiple special meetings where we all convene? Are we all going to get one offer? Are we handing it over to the commission to do the negotiation? I would just, I want some clarity as for the process component of that. And then I do have a follow-up, Your Worship.
Certainly. Who'd like to take that one?
And maybe I could speak to you as it relates. So your Huronia Airport Commission is a standalone entity from you as a municipality with amazing governments, with great governance involved. So you have a member of each of your communities, or more than one in one case, on that Huronia Airport Commission. In addition, you also have your task force in there, which includes senior staff at the municipalities as well as members. So under the model, it would be the Huronia Airport Commission. They are the keeper of the land. The land is titled to them. They would be the person's doing the negotiation. So once you approve this, it does not need to come back to the municipality. Although, as Roy said, you're going to see any of the updates as part of your normal budget process. So every year, the budget comes forward, and any pending land sales or land sales that will have taken place will come back to you. You should take great comforts in that, because you do have the commission in place. You have representatives directly looking after the best interests of each of your member municipalities on the commission, and they are the ones with tasked with the responsibility. The other thing is you have some good principles that also follow any land sale when you're dealing with a public entity, because your Huronia Airport Commission is working as a public entity, and it requires the approval of Transport Canada for the land sales. And that means that any land sales are going to have to be at or above the appraised value. And that should give you great comfort. So you have that in place. Your land sales are always going to be at or above appraised value in order to meet the burden with the Transport Canada approval piece, which is added in there for you. So I think you can take great comfort in knowing that you've got your people deciding how that goes forward, and always knowing that it has to be at or above appraised land sale value. Also, that the proceeds need to go into the capital use. So you've got some safeguards laid out within their existing model. And of course, that's how they deal today with the leases, right? They make very prudent decisions to move it forward. You don't have to see the leases, and the same would be true with the land sales. I'm not sure, Roy, if you really want to add anything, but I think I addressed that for you.
No, I just very quickly though, I think the governance model is key. You have 3 CAOs, your highest staff member, and Tiny's planner on the HAT team. So everything you're seeing today has been vetted by those folks on our journey over the last 3 years. So we would be looking for guidance and capability and support, and would be challenged by them. But we would also, you'd charge a development fee of sorts, and we haven't gone way deep into this at this moment, just in case tonight you had no energy or low energy to say yes. So we can spend a lot of time, going down there and building that framework and bringing in lawyers and consultants. But we thought the prudent thing to do would be to come here, sell the business case, and see if we got support by the owner municipalities. And to Stephen's point, the checks and balances are pretty well there. We have full authority. It was only 7 years ago we were looking at leasing 100 acres to a solar farm at the airport. It never came to council. Ted Simmons with HGR, myself, were negotiating with these folks in Florida. And that shouldn't scare you, because you have 2 mayors and a deputy mayor and 3 CAOs and Tiny's planner at the table, and they'll be watching the money. So thank you, Stephen. And I don't know if we've answered that question completely. I think you had a follow-up.
Please go ahead with your follow-up.
Thank you, Your Worship. That answered my question about the negotiation process. Thank you. My other one is a comment, and it reverts back to the discussion about the governance process. I just wanted to reiterate that I think communication is key, and that needs to improve. You mentioned the snow blower purchase and the urgency in October of getting this done. As much as our CAO and planner are involved in the hat, no one in Tiny Township was apprised of this purchase prior to it happening. We were handed the bill after it was already purchased, which I do not believe is an appropriate allocation of funds. I don't want to dwell on past mistakes. I just want to figure out and ensure how this doesn't happen in the future. I recognize that there was an election going on, but the CAO and staff were in place. They should have been apprised. And we have the opportunity to. Yeah, there's a feedback. Okay. Anyway, my comment is this. Sorry, it's hard to hear. This shouldn't happen in the future. Thank you.
Mayor Gordon, brief response, if I may.
Absolutely. I
Yes,
consider
so-
that was good feedback.
So as I mentioned, the vote was 7-0. Tiny had a council rep on the board at that time. And we also have the authority to borrow money. That's already authority that you have given the commission. We are an essential service and we needed to make a decision in the interest of safety, and we made a decision. I don't like how it happened, Councilor Wallner, and if we had to do it again, I'd like to do it differently. But in that very moment, during the election cycle, during a change, and Zach has only been around a year. The top operations person's only been around a year, and our bookkeeper left all at the same time. So our budget process the year prior could have been improved, but that's our reality. That was our reality. And I want to put it on the table to acknowledge that it wasn't the best way.
Fair enough. Moving to Councillor McDonald then.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Gordon. First of all, thank you for the very strong business case presentation. The fact that I got to visit the airport beforehand made it a little easier to digest. So the 61 acres is is that about 9% of what you own? And are you going to come around and say, oh, we need more land now? Is my first question. And then perhaps the second question would be something that could be addressed when we're just debating amongst ourselves, but I'm wondering about the tax revenue that if the land is sold, who would, how is that divided up? Thank you.
Sorry, I don't have my notes here in front of me, but I'll take a shot at that. 61 acres, 350, I think it's about 18%. A big portion of that is on the non-aviation piece on the east side, north side of your slide, if you recall, which was for, again, non-aviation commercial. I'm sorry, Councilor McDonald, I missed which other part of the question? I was trying to find my slide deck here.
Your partial response made another question. So you think about 18%, and there is still a portion of that is aviation. I guess my question is going to leave you short. Are you going to be looking for more land in the future?
I think it'll be a long time in the future before we come looking for more land. I think if we look at Oshawa's journey from 2008 to 2023, it has been methodical. I'll ask Stephen to comment. I think this is a 10 to 20 year plan. We won't be talking to you about the west side for the reasons I mentioned earlier, which is the wetland and lack of services and road access and those things. That is major infrastructure money. And we've all had lots of experiences with major infrastructure and master plans, Midland Bay Landing. I mean, all that sort of stuff. It's major. This is the best plan we can see from Lumex, from WSP, from peer review, from the CAOs, from your commission to get us to this point that says, hey, this is going to work and it's going to address the elephant in the room, which we all know is capital, to avoid the types of situations that we're going to find ourselves in. Those situations won't go away. This baby is owned by the 3 municipalities. You know, I want to say that again. This baby is, we have to feed this baby. Just like Stephen said, you've got a runway there, 4,000 feet. You know, to repair the runway in X amount of years will cost what? I mean, to put 1,000 feet of runway, not that we're going to suggest for a moment we do that, it's like $1.5 million. It's a real road, you know, that transports people, product, and goods. And that's what it does. So the short answer, we think we are very comfortable with this, and we hope not to be back for 15 years.
And the tax revenue,
I'm sorry?
the tax revenue, how is that, if the acreage is sold, it generates tax revenue? And is that divided proportionally to the ratio of the ownership?
Great question. So, and this is a great problem to have as you talk about all your shared services, whether you're talking about fire or you're talking about who uses your library and library cards from Tiny and all that other sort of stuff. There are a lot of things going on that you're going to deal with, and you're going to have a really cool meeting, I'm sure, at some point about shared services and efficiencies. And when you do that, because this is 2-3 years out, by the time you put the shovel in the ground and you get all those roads in, and then you put up a building, and then impact finally gets out and they say, hey, that's worth about $1 million, and the tax rate in Tiny is 0.7, they say that's 70 grand, and then they give 40% to county and education. There's not going to be a whole bunch of money on the operating, on the tax revenue side in the short term, but we won't come and ask you, hopefully, if these leads are legitimate and we do our job well, for that capital, which I think, you know, the reason we're here tonight is to try and deal with that issue. And I know as we sell more fuel, Hydro One was in today filling up that chopper twice. As you build more buildings and you have more activity, we're going to make good margins on fuel alone. I know operating will come down, but the issue of taxation and assessment and money's coming back and how you divide it, it's a beautiful problem to have. And I would say do it in the context of all of those things that you guys are doing together to try and become more efficient.
Thank you.
Thank you. Going next to Councillor Vadabon-Carroll from Penetanguishene.
Thank you, Worship. I have a question for Mr. Wilcox pertaining to the Oshawa development. Were the lands sold as freehold, or did were they sold and developed as commercial condominiums? And it leads to who's going to be responsible for the maintenance of the new infrastructure that services those lands.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's another excellent question. So in the case of Oshawa, all of the lands were sold as freehold lands. And so the each one of the blocks associated with the hangars was independent property deeded to them. And in our case, we have regional services, right? And so at your house, if you're in the city or in Durham region, the municipality owns the water under the street, and the development, or you own it from the street to your house. Now, there was one large block that did go as plan a condominium. So the large hangar complex on the right side is all plan a condominium. And so there are some services that are leading up to that, but all the services underneath the ground are looked after by them. In your case here, each one of those is going to be a divided property. Our plan will create that road access, if you will, which becomes, think of it like a municipal road where they have a deeded right of way over it, and they have the right to put the services in. But each one of these properties is really looking at water and sanitary in the form of probably a septic system. So that means that's property specific. Hydro is going to deal with the hydro piece of it. So you don't really have any services to concern yourself with in the property here as it relates to the way that this development would go forward. So I don't think that's really a big concern for you here. One of the key pieces that was mentioned, and perhaps the only piece that you would have some longer term costs, It did talk about the each one of the developments as those commercial developments moved in the yellow area and further to the south along there, whether it was the aviation or non-aviation land. The expectation is that they would build the road and that they would build the taxiway, and that those additional costs to maintain the road and maintain the taxiway would be within the airport budget. And of course, that's going to be offset easily by the revenue that those businesses generate in form of whether it's additional fuel sales, landing fees, all of those things that airport generates. So they should be easily covered. And the airport, of course, has the ability also to put a through the gate maintenance type fee. And so the airport will deal with that prudently through its airport budget. I can tell you in the Oshawa case, and I'm sure Roy said earlier, he loves stealing our good ideas, and that's awesome. That's the best form of flattery, is when someone steals your ideas. And but we do that. We recover maintenance costs from those developments, so there's no burden on the budget. In other words, the budget gets better. That's why it went from 470 down to 230. Thank you.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Councillor?
Thank you. Just on your last point, Mr. Wilcox, what's the mechanism that you use to recover those maintenance costs?
Yeah, thanks. There's a couple different mechanisms you can use, and that'll be something for the commission to look at. Its current revenue strategy. So you have landing fees in place for certain sizes of aircraft. As Roy said, you also have a nice margin on your fuel. Those are two revenue models. One of the things to look at will be what we call through the gate fee, where anyone accessing on the taxiways could have a maintenance fee imposed. So that'll be something the commission will look at as these services are brought on to say, okay, how are we dealing with the maintenance costs and how are we generating revenue from them? And again, the commission has been doing a great job with that. There's lots of industry best practices for them to borrow from. So I think that the commission will look to that to make sure they continue to minimize the cost implications on the operating budget.
Thank you.
All right, moving next to Midland Councillor Prost.
Thank you, Mayor Gordon. I had a couple of questions and I'm going to ask them anyway. How much debt is the Huronia Airport currently in, or how much do they carry? And will any of the proceeds go to cover some of that? But before you even answer, by the looks of what I've seen, as impressive as it is, there's a huge ask. There's a huge list of things that you need for capital. So that debt, regardless of what it is today, is going to grow rapidly. The return is not going to be quick by any means, like you've already said, 10 to 20 years when things are in place and things are running smoothly. If this goes through, I'll let you say something to that.
Yeah. So thanks for those questions. I'm a volunteer, so I'll take a shot at debt because we're just starting our audit, and I see numbers like the rest of the commission sees, and I would say I'm aware of a couple of numbers. One is the blower, so call that $160. The runway, I think what's left on the life of that repair, maybe around 80. So let's say 250 might be the debt. That's a guess, and I want to qualify that by saying I didn't come here tonight with that number in mind. Okay, is that fair? So call it about 250, and I'm going to turn around to Zach and say, am I missing something? Okay, so he's nodding his head, so he should know. With respect to the capital ask, and not to go back to the slides unless you really want me to, because I think then we lose everyone's faces. The left side of the capital was plus or minus 500,000, and they're not immediate needs. Okay, that's end of life assets. It'd be like you putting aside money for a fire truck at 20 years and all that sort of stuff. So in the next 2-3 years, we might come back and ask you for 500. I'm fairly confident we can generate that fairly quickly so that we can avoid that conversation. On the right side of that was about $1 million, and I'll call that revenue generating. In a perfect world, if somebody dropped a lot of money in our lap, we would build T hangars. We are 100% at capacity right now with lessees and people that want to build. We have no openings, no space of that 100,000, close to 100,000. So if I were king for a day and if it were my business, I would probably, I would do the sale thing. I would work hard to sell some land. I would generate some capital, and then I would get into revenue generating assets, which is that right side of that one slide that we shared with you. So 501 million plus or minus. I think that's the way I'd like to answer that one. I'm not sure if I answered all your questions.
Well, you did a little
And-
bit, and before you, sorry, before you even got to me, I got some of the answers. I just really, the only other thing is to make a comment that the municipalities owning the land is not actually what it is. I understand how that works, but to the public, they think that, I mean, in general, that we own 50% of the airport. So if you own something, you can decide to sell it and walk away. That's not the case in this. We have the tri-agreement and we have a statute. And I just wanted to put that out there because it's not as cut and dry as we own 50% and Tiny and Penetang share the rest in ownership. So it's just a comment.
If
Stephen. Yeah.
Yeah, if I could jump in and just add a little bit of something there. I think one of the really important pieces, and you've touched on a really important part, and again, it's that how do we continue to generate revenue to minimize the cost to the ratepayer to the greatest extent possible? With the existing debt, that's already being serviced out of operating. That's built into that $3.42 or 47-cent number there. So that's built into there, and that's being looked after. Everything that Roy was showing on the next slide was really looking at what your future concerns are. And really there's two big capital concerns that you have at the airport. One is you can't run an airport if you don't have capable equipment, and you have a few capable pieces and some very, very tired pieces. And so there is some capital needs on equipment that you need to have to be able to meet current aviation regulatory requirements for the maintenance of the airport. You also have some capital opportunities. Roy mentioned building the T hangars. So in one of our transactions, we took revenue from the land sale, and there were two existing large T hangar complexes, and we bought them. And so we took out of our capital and bought them. Now, in your case, Roy's discussing building them, and it's a great way to do it because once you have them, they continue to generate revenue, and that's a great way to do that. So I think there's some opportunities that also allow you to deal with it. And again, you'll have some runway maintenance down the road, and all of that capital can allow you to do it. I also think you have some low-hanging fruit that's very easy low-hanging fruit. You have, of course, the number of interests that have already come forward. And we had a business call me today looking for a large complex, wanted to be on the Oshawa Airport. I have no more non-aviation land available. And I had to say to the sale, I just don't have any more for you. They're looking for employment lands. There's a shortage in Durham region. I understand there's a pretty big shortage up in your area for employment lands as well. And there you have that 20 acres of employment land that can generate employment, folks. And when people are employed, they buy cheeseburgers, they put their kids in hockey, they live in the community, they support the schools, they get involved in voluntary groups. So all of that employment is a really, really key piece. And that's part of what you have. So I think you have some low-hanging fruit. And of course, you have the existing hangar owners. I'd be very surprised if the majority of the existing hangar owners don't buy their property. So I think you're going to find that you're going to generate some reasonable capital very quickly because you already have some low-hanging fruit. And that's what you'll continue to have as long as you move forward with a strategy to sell land and open this opportunity up for business to come and be part of your community. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions on that item.
A follow-up, Councillor Prost?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to go back to, you threw out a number and I'm sure it's a ballpark number. But you said in the next 2 or 3 years, you may come and ask us for $500,000. So that's kind of ballpark what you're thinking even after the sale?
No, if we don't sell anything, that's in the plan right now. If we sell something, and Stephen just mentioned low-hanging fruit, we did a survey. I'll give you an example. We did a survey of private hangar owners. There's 30, as I mentioned, and about 50%, and it was just a pulse survey, just to try and get a feel for who would be interested in buying maybe land. And that was at a valuation of 155 divided by the square foot of 45,000 feet for an acre and all that sort of stuff, plus a development fee. And we figured we could raise 250,000 fairly quick. So if this geopark thing happens with a letter of intent, which we can turn into a sale, that will be quite significant, 6 acres. So we're actually trying to do what you're suggesting, and that is like take that issue away so you don't have to deal with it. But we can't do it if we don't have the ability to generate the capital. So it's like the chicken and the egg a little bit. I think you could be quite successful, the 3 owner municipalities, in generating enough capital. And we've seen it with Oshawa's model. So I'm not afraid of this. And there's a lot of people knocking on our door. And, you know, acting swiftly is a good thing in economic development, like cautiously too, and being responsible. And that's why we have the CAOs on the team giving us great guidance. And I'm talking Robert Lamb, talking Jeff Lease, Tiny's planner, Andy. We talk to these folks quite a bit. So, and that's because we don't have the resources. So we get their best thinking. So no, I threw out a quick number of 500. That was ballpark, but that number should go away if we can get this decision, and then we can put in a self-help program, so to speak.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Pass it over to Midlands Deputy Mayor Cotton.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just listening to your presentation. Thanks for that, for updating us and what the situation is. I guess my question is, in several areas of the financial stewardship that we move forward if the sale does go through and whatever. And I heard you say that the commission has authority. So to me, it sounds like it's a legal entity in terms of responsibility to ensure that the financial stewardship for the future is in the revenue generated is associated more with, my understanding is with the capital investment, or it'll go into that pot. Does this mean that the commission would manage that, or the 3 partners would have a say? And does that go into a reserve system in order for future planning? And then the other aspect to the financial stewardship is really looking at Lumix, if that's the review of the I guess progression for the future, it may change. So you may have to update your review study just in terms of creating new opportunities, like a business airport, I guess, structure where businesses could be looked at from investment to leasing to ownership. So things have changed just in terms of this potential for this opportunity. So anyway, my question would be is what is the benefit for the ratepayers for the 3 municipalities? How do you reduce that, or do you have to carry it further for further investment to see those benefits work?
Right. So maybe I'll take the first shot, Steve, and you're holding short. Actually, Deputy Mayor Conn, all of the above, like in terms of financial stewardship, in terms of resources we bring in. I'm thinking very quickly when you sold the utility and for 22 million or whatever it was, and forewent the dividend. And then you protected 10 million, I think, right away. And then you put 10 in some account you could borrow from internally. All of those things that you do and you have done, we would look at doing very similar things. And the really cool thing, and just, I don't sit on the commission as a voting member anymore, just so everyone knows and understands. I'm just a resource to the airport to the extent they want me. If they don't want me, then I'm okay with that. But this has been a 3-year journey of due diligence where we've got to this point where I've come here many times into Penetang and Tiny, and the folks over there will know, and basically, you know, begged for money. And so we went away and we said, okay, how can we do this where we can make this a greater value? And I want to say greater value, because peer reviews are saying that you get good value. Now, whether you think it should be 100%, paid by airport and you don't have any interest in Orange and GBGH, well, that's a whole nother discussion, which I don't think we want to get in tonight. But clearly we need to put processes in play. But I did say to you right from the outset that there's no point in doing a ton of that work. You've got 2 mayors and the deputy mayor and your CAOs and Tiny's planner engaged. I don't know who else wants to be on that governance body, but I'm sure if you put your hand up, the mayors might allow it. So, but I think you're in good hands with Allstate right about now. So, Deputy Mayor Conton, I'm not sure if I answered. I'm not trying to be funny. We don't have all the answers yet, but it's a pretty simple model, a financial model.
Yeah, and maybe I would just jump in on it, Roy. I think that as it stands right today, the biggest benefit, just really at the question that you ask, is that you address the capital need. Roy's already indicated, and I've seen it firsthand, they will need to come back to you with money at a bare minimum for the capital to keep the airport operating to meet Transport Canada standards. So there will be a capital ask if the decision to sell land is declined. So that's coming, and it will keep coming. This model should take that capital ask away for a very, very long time as it matures. And of course, activity reduces costs. So it has a big benefit. I think then having the capital to use prudently, again, you've got a good governance model. You've got smart people on the commission. You have smart people on the task force. And I think they'll be very prudent with the resources and borrow from many of the good examples that you have in how each municipality manages your capital reserves and any contributions to your various capital reserves. I think there's some great examples they can borrow from and to the greatest benefit of the ratepayers.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Oh, Councillor East.
Thank you, Your Worship. This would be more of a question for Stephen. The framework that you showed from the other airports, when they sell their properties, is it the same kind of framework for Huronia that say, I guess what my question is, when the other property sold for the other airports that you're talking about, did the funding from the reserves go back into the municipality, or is the framework the same as Huronia, that there's a committee that controls it? And then the second question that I have is, how would it look if we agreed to sell the property but kept the revenue in our reserves through the municipalities? And is that a possibility on how we could look at that and how it would affect everything?
Mr. Wilcox, if I could, just before you jump in on that one, I know, funny enough, I'd had this very same question, but I'd had the opportunity to bump into Mr. Campbell and pick his brain in the hallway. So perhaps I could let Mr. Campbell chime in for a moment and then fill in any gaps with Mr. Wilcox or Mr. Ellis.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor East. Under the act that created the airport, any sale of land, all of that revenue must and shall go to the commission, not to the municipality. And that is why, even if after council, if they decide to go down the sale agreement today, the minister of transport has the final decision on the sale. And one of the key factors is that the revenue generated is returned to the airport, not to the municipalities. So the guarantee here is that airport revenue goes back to the airport, not to the municipalities. And currently that's not a decision that any of the 3 municipalities can make.
Thank you. Any add on there, Mr. Wilcox?
Yeah, I think just really another important piece of it. First off, all the airports that I sold you, with the exception of Oshawa, do not sell land. So they do not have a competitive advantage. And you remember I said, one of the things that this does is give you a significant competitive advantage. Roy mentioned Geoparks looking at other airports. The ability for them to buy land where they otherwise have to lease land is a large competitive advantage. It will bring them to you as opposed to another airport. And so that's really important piece of the puzzle. And it also generates the capital. And as has already been said, has to stay in the airport reserve, be used for capital. That's a requirement of Transport Canada in order for the minister to sign off. So some really good safeguards, generating capital so they don't have to come and ask you for the money for capital, and giving you a competitive advantage. That's why we've had the growth in Oshawa. Oshawa is a wonderful airport. This isn't any more wonderful than Peterborough or Simcoe, but take a look at both of those, our most direct competitors, and we have substantially more aircraft, substantially more income, substantially more hangars, substantially more taxation, because we have a competitive advantage. And that's what this model will do for you, is give you a competitive advantage. And by the way, I don't ask for capital because we have land sales to generate capital.
They're good. All right, I don't see any other questions. I'll maybe just throw my 2 cents in then. In the past, oh, sorry. Okay, I do actually have another question after this. So in the past, it's no secret, anyone that's followed me the past few years, I've been fairly critical of the airport and its costs, without people really feeling the love or the return on investment for owning this asset, primarily because it was status quo. Nothing was changing. There was no growth. The light at the end of the tunnel looked like a train coming. So no foreseeable prospect for growth. But I'll tell you, my perspective on that has been changing, not just because I went to one commission meeting, but just watching this opportunity. So I'm relieved that there's the selling of this land is not for speculation or holding. If anyone's going to hold the land, it should be the people that own the land, not selling it off to anyone else. So the fact that there's some rails on that and requirements for development after purchase is comforting to me. And the fact that this organization is now starting to sound and look like it's running more like an expanding business rather than a small marina or a club that a lot of people feel that the airport has been over the past many years. And the fact that we're using the same model that we preach municipally, which is growth paying for growth, although we're getting our legs cut off by Bill 23 right now, but growth is supposed to pay for growth, and this is the growth opportunity. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the Airport Commission and what's being proposed, even though this is a departure from the agreement that's been sitting around and in use for decades. I think in this case, it's deserving, because if we do nothing, it's status quo. And to Councillor Crow's point, and I think to others, we're going to just keep seeing more asks. And if there's a pot of money or a reserve that is being filled up with these land sales, then that reduces the ask to us and might help people feel the love for the airport, or at least begrudge, paying their $3.50 could go down to $1.20 or something. So, and the other thing I just wanted to note on too is the efficiency. I appreciate our partners joining us tonight, because the efficiency in this shared information session like this and the consistent messaging, making sure we all get the exact same messaging, and the benefit of hearing each other's questions and answers, I think really is a novel approach. So I just want to applaud the clerks and everybody that took part in creating this sort of mishmash we have here in this virtual joint session. So those are my only comments, not really a question, but thank you both for your presentations. And I guess I give the last question, unless I see another virtual hand go up, to Councillor Meredith.
Thank you, Mayor Gordon. Just a comment, maybe, in the near future, we should take a look at our bylaws. The actual bylaw that's from 2000, over 2 decades old, to review that with our partners and go over a review, and maybe we could change some of the wording for the capital and so forth. But anyways, that's not my question. That's just a comment. We talk about, and this could be either to Mr. Wilcox or Mr. Ellis. Mr. Wilcox, you did comment about the airport being more, not a business, but more infrastructure, geared towards infrastructure. And that model, my question is, with Huronia Airport, and I'm not sure if you run your the airport, the Oshawa Airport, the same way, but anything under, I think, 3,000 kilos aircraft landing and taking off, there's no charge. Yet when we look at infrastructure, we want to put $80,000 into a runway. It's that very aircraft that's causing some of these repairs. So The business model, or if it's not a business, but the model, to me is not right if you're not charging for these takeoffs and landing, and that's could be another revenue stream that should be updated in my eyes. This is the year 2023, and I don't know if anything is free in this world anymore. So anything under 3,000 kilos should be reviewed, I believe, and that's my opinion on that. And if you want to answer or comment on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things to keep in mind is that in that opening statement, we identified that when we're looking at revenue within industry established practices. And so the industry many years ago, it's a post-World War II decision that the airports recognized that sending a guy in a little two-seat airplane a bill for $1.50 and expecting to get paid was not realistic. And so the industry doesn't charge them. But what the industry does do is we get a cut of the fuel. Sometimes we own the fuel facility like you do there, where you're getting 30 or 40 cents a liter. But in absence of that, all airports typically get a 3 to 4 cent or 2 to 3 cent per liter on all the fuel sales that go through, even when they don't own the tanks and don't deliver the fuel. And that was the way that they collect revenue from the little guys. So it's fair to say, actually, that all aircraft pay, and through the fuel model was a mechanism that was established post-World War II to collect that fee from the little guys rather than sending them a bill for $10 or $15 today. In today's standards is what it is. And then again, some airports very prudently, your airport and our airport, we operate the bulk plant because I want the 30 cents a liter direct sale or the 20 cents a liter. Imagine if you got 2 cents a liter from every gas station in your communities. That'd be pretty good, eh? And so that's what we do at the airport. And in your case, you get more than that. So that everyone does pay. Typically the large airports, the Torontos, the Pearsons do charge everybody, including the little guy. But airports of your category and our category, it's not common. So we want to keep an industry best practice because it would be contrary to encourage development and allow a growth and then drive the customers away because you charge the fee that no other airport charged. Right. So want to keep with industry best practices. And right now you're following them. Good to review it and look at the model to see what you're making on your fuel and how that works. But right now you're at industry best practices. And I've seen your financial. It looks like you're doing a pretty nice job with the fuel. Hopefully that clarifies that issue for you.
Mayor Gordon, could I just follow up real quick? At our last commission meeting, we actually reviewed all of the landing fees, development fees, put a whole new chart in play. It was approved by your new commission. I was talking to a training gentleman, a flight one instructor just a couple of weeks ago. In Perry Sound, you may know that they've just spent 10 million on that airport to reorientate the runway and add 1,000 feet. They plan to close for 4 months this summer to do all that work. So we had calls from Perry Sound about hangar space and we can't fly for 4 months and this and that. And that was 90% of that money was given from the depressed North, right? FedEv and all that sort of stuff. But this gentleman told me, who takes people on flight training and certification, he doesn't fly into North Bay anymore or Sudbury anymore because they introduced $100 landing fee for a pilot. And when you're learning how to fly, you go to these places and you touch down maybe, 5 times and, hone your skills and come back around and this and that. And he actually told me as a flight school, they don't go there anymore. So, I always say you can't sell a $20 hamburger. You've got to be competitive. You've got to be competitive with the landscape. And you should get confident knowing, Councilor Emeritus, that your board, your commission reviewed that just recently. And Stephen wouldn't know that. That's why I had to come.
Okay, just at the risk of making sure we don't sway, I know we talked about some of this in the budget session, but we really should be focusing on the land sale, not general operation of the airport and costs and how they run and everything like that. There's plenty of time to talk about that, but to be fair, we have all our other councillors. We've got to try and stay on topic here. So if we have questions about the ask in front of us, I'd ask that we try and limit our questions to that. And same thing about opening up the agreement again. there's an appetite for that, I think, but again, tonight wouldn't be the night for. Did you, anything related to the ask? Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, I won't follow up to that, but I do have one question. You mentioned the land in question right now is a 7.6 acres of, trying to pull up, is the aviation commercial 7.6 acres. Is that and you were quoted at one point of getting 155,000 an acre. Is that correct? Is that what? So
That's correct, about 2 years ago.
About 2 years ago. So the 7.6 acres would be sold at 1.1 with those numbers, almost 1.2 million. Is that correct? That piece of land? That's,
Don't know.
But
you know,
basic-
we have to get a proper commercial evaluation. This was a residential realtor that threw out that number. That was 2 years ago, so the world has changed. We have a letter of intent for 6 acres. Whether or not they would pay that amount, it depends on, I think, the infrastructure that you would require them to put in. If they have to put in the road and build the road, extend taxiway Bravo, there will be a negotiation. I can't tell you what that would look like, right? Because they get to say too. So you know, we're here. I can't give you more definitive answers until I get facts.
just to follow up. Okay. It's just kind of hard for me to make a decision if I don't have numbers in front of me, and whether it's worth it for, you know, I'm not saying that commercial real estate is always worth to get revenue. But what is that price? Is it 200,000? Is it $1.2 million? It's a big difference of what we can do with that money, instead of you coming back and, you know, 2 years asking for more money. So those numbers are pretty important, and I'm not sure why those numbers weren't brought to us today, knowing that we were having this meeting. So a little difficult to know what at the sale price or what the ballpark is with this sale of lands. And unfortunately, we don't have those answers, correct?
I'm telling you everything I know. And, you know, we could spend a lot of money on lawyers and consultants at the airport to validate certain things, but it's already painful to get budget. So why would we spend all that money if tonight, in your collective wisdom, you say, no, go back to bumping along and lease a couple of hangars every year, and we'll see you next year. So that's really, right, the discussion we're having. I can tell you that 50% of the private hangar owners who were surveyed in a poll survey 2 years ago basically said they would be interested in buying the land underneath their hangar. That would probably generate $250 and pay for the snow blower and some other stuff right there. If we get the deal with Geo Park, there will be a big negotiation. He's building a $5 million hangar, 25,000 square feet. He's going to have to extend taxiway Bravo for the benefit of everyone at the airport. So I don't, you know, we're not in a room with these folks saying, okay, we're going to take your letter of intent into a real offer at this moment. But I can tell you, unless we get the authority to be able to have that discussion, it will never happen. And you have governance. I think the other thing that some of us should wrap our arms around is that, you know, the only question on the table, and Mayor Gordon said it, is, do you want the airport to have authority, the commission to have authority to sell certain amounts of land? That's the question on the table. If you give the airport the authority, and I mentioned they have council reps, in this case, 2 mayors and a deputy mayor, CAOs and a planner. If you give those folks the authority, I can tell you the burden on capital will go down. That's what I do know. How much, I can't tell you, but it will start to go in a different trajectory. That's the best we could do.
Any follow-up?
Just a quick follow-up, and I agree with you on that statement. But at the end of the day, we give you authority, the commission. I don't know what price tag I'm given authority on for the sale of that land, and that's the issue I'm having right now. So if we had the numbers, then absolutely we could do the math and say, hey, yeah, is the capital that we're going to get from the airport, is it going to last 1 year and with very minimal?
Point of order, your worship.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if we shouldn't be talking numbers in this anyway, if it's a negotiation, we don't want prospective buyers to know what we're willing to negotiate for.
Yeah, that's a valid point. That kind of negotiation would happen in camera, and actually wouldn't happen here at all. It would happen at the commission, because this is the part that is weird. We own this and we direct it and we fund them, but there's a commission that makes the decisions on our behalf. So we wouldn't be directly involved in blessing the deal anyway. That's kind of, it could be a raw point of contention for some of the owners, our councils, but the commission has the autonomy to manage that airport. And we have the duty and the requirement, because of the arrangement, to finance and fund the airport. So, and of course, exiting the airport, as any one of us, as we have already talked about amongst ourselves, is not an easy thing. So, which is why we're really trying to stay focused on tonight, on just giving the commission the authority that it's lacking in the current agreement, which is to consider selling land. And then hopefully we read a good press release on an update from the commission that they've negotiated a good, reasonable rate for that land, and that there's economic development coming and all the goodness that follows. That's the caution here. And Councillor Walma, your point is well taken there. We shouldn't be talking about the numbers. We should be talking about the mechanics of this, and that they need the authority to enter into this, to even consider selling land. And for example, this group that's wanting to buy some property wouldn't and couldn't approach our councils about this. We would have to send them back to the commission, whose name is on title. So it is kind of a fuzzy, weird gray thing for us, and it's the only shared asset we have. And as we try to navigate this, it's important because we're also considering other shared ventures through this term, how we can find efficiencies and savings. We're going to struggle with this, I think. So I don't know that that there's really much point continuing along anything where we're trying to nail down a number. Did you have anything that wasn't so granular?
Just to follow up, I think we need to review the bylaw 2006-8 in the very near future. So this confusion doesn't happen. And this process to me, is ridiculous. Thank you.
Mr. Campbell, did
If
you
I-
have anything to add? Sorry, I wasn't sure. I didn't see your physical hand, but I saw your eyebrows. So just reading the room.
Your worship, I think you've stated that the discussion today is to deal with can this commission sell property? That is the ask today. The commission's a separate corporation under act of government. And aside from the bylaw, there's a lot of other governing rules that the commission has to abide by. And those discussions, I think, are outside of the discussion for today. Not that council can't have those discussions, but right now we've got a developer and some buyers that may be interested. We need to tell them, is there an option, an opportunity here? Because otherwise they'll go elsewhere. And you've heard the comment about competitive advantage. When we get out of this session of council, I'll maybe talk a little bit about competitive advantage at airports separately to council.
All right, thank you.
If I
Any
could
other
just,
follow up, Mr. Wilcox, please go ahead.
yeah, sorry to interrupt, Mayor. I was just going to add, keep in mind, folks, that you do have the Minister of Transportation at the federal level, making sure that your commission gets good value for you. And that's a really important piece. They have to give approval for the land sales. They're not going to give approval unless they're satisfied that you got fair market value for the lands and that the transaction is in the best interest of the airport. And so that's a really, really key piece of the puzzle. And there are capital dollars, and I agree with the Councillor Walma. I think these are property transactions that the commission will have in camera, so that we're not showing your hands to potential purchasers. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor? Deputy Mayor Conton, that is. Sorry, we've got a couple in the house tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship. This is to probably Mr. Wilcox and probably Mr. Ellis. Tonight we heard comparables to Huronia Airport. We looked at Oshawa. They're all different circumstances for their situation based upon population and business opportunities. And we're in Huronia, which is quite different as a comparator. So it's difficult to see what that comparison is all about. But what I picked up is there are opportunities if only we did this, or if we only did that. And that's going to be the future. And I guess my question is understanding what the limitations are for carrying capacity if we were to sell more property in the future rather than lease property. In what direction could come out of this particular new opportunity for sales? And that's kind of what needs to be created. And we have to understand the dynamics of Midland itself as a growing community. The county says we're going to grow next 10 years. They've been saying that 10 years ago. But I think with this new opportunity, I think we need a better snapshot from a financial, I guess, investment to ensure that this could carry on to something better or more. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on where we came from. And I've seen the figures 10 years ago to what it is now. I didn't see the figures too much from Midland 10 years ago and where it's now. When if we do this, where will it be in the next 10 years? I think that's something that we need to look for just in terms of future investment.
So I think that was directed to Stephen, and then I've got a follow-up. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I think a really big point is raised. Of course, we know Southern Ontario is growing, right? We've also seen this tremendous propensity for people to leave the city. And I think, one of the interesting options or opportunities that you have rather is for the fellow that owns his HVAC business. He said, you know what? I'm going to get out of the city. I'm going to sell my business. I'm going to come up here to Midland and establish my business here because it's growing enough. And that's what happens, right? Growth happens naturally. But probably the most important point that you touched on is that you want to make sure that the airport is growing in lockstep with what your community is growing, because the airport's an enabler. When someone's looking to move their family to your communities, they're going to be looking at what services you have, and they're going to think about the really important things. And one of those really important things is healthcare and how it's dealt with, and making sure you've got the infrastructure here. I don't think I would have to describe to any one of you here what an Orange Air ambulance looks like. We've all seen it enough on TV. So that's the kind of thing that people already think about. And we see that as they're moving into communities. So the airports are great enablers. You want to make sure you look after this enabler. And the airport will grow as your relative municipalities grow and be an enabler for that growth, because it will encourage, again, with employment lands, the kind of things you need to be an enabler. So I don't think I'd add any more to that, but it's important to keep it within the context as an enabler. And I don't think I mentioned that perhaps as clearly as I should have in the earlier slides. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor,
there
did
a
you want me to
follow-up?
respond?
I thought Mr. Ellis was going to follow up. Sorry.
Yeah, I thought he had a very eloquent answer, but again, what I know, if we go back 10 years at the airport, the revenue growth has been marginal. It's been one hangar, two hangars. The average hangar leases for $1,000, so $2,000 revenue. Okay, we were able to get the T hangar for, that's probably today's value is about $750,000. We got that as a gift from the government, the higher level of government, which generates the 40K. So we got some revenue there, but without the ability to sell land, it will bump along. I will tell you that. It will bump along because we do not have a competitive advantage here. We don't. The winters are pretty cruel. Like Hydro was out there today, as I said, filling up twice, doing emergency services. And I don't want to play the 9/11 card. I don't do that, right? I don't do that. I've never blamed that for anything, or the COVID card. But the fact of the matter is, we will continue to bump along at your airport. And in some regions, let's put the thing on the table. Wyerton, I think, sold for 2.5 million, twice as many acres as we had. That's everything. That's land and assets. I truly believe, and your board believes, your commission, who you gave authority to make these recommendations and come to you and speak to you in front of tonight, we believe that there's a $7 to $10 million opportunity there on 61.4 acres. That's what we believe. Your whole board believes that. And the CAOs signed off on it. They all saw the deck. So what I do know is if we don't do that, we will be seeing you again, right, each year, because we have no mechanism to create the wow factor, to do something magnanimous to get investment. We don't. And 10 years ago, we had very little investment. Again, and you know that, Deputy Mayor. And we've had many conversations about, what causes enabler, what frustrates economic development, what doesn't. So that's what I know. So even if you collectively agree to sell, you're going to look at selling a couple of $1 million and take off your debt, and you're going to lose the control that you have of your airport. When Ange phones us at 10 o'clock at night, he goes out and pumps fuel. We don't have snowplow guys. I think I said it once before. We spend about $160,000 on labor, total labor and benefits. Okay, total comp. That's like one department head out of all the 3 municipalities, which you pay a 50% of that $140,000. So, we got to get to another place. It's like the definition of insanity. And we've come to you with a recommendation because we truly believe this will stop the conversation about the airport and turn it into a pull and go, holy crap, what's going on at the airport? This is cool. And that's what I live for, cool. So, sorry, that's my closing statement, Mr. Conlon, on that one.
All right, looks like we have one last hand here, and that's from the council chambers of the town of Pentagwasheen. So I'll turn it over to them. And this is where perhaps we can make them bigger.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it's been great dialogue tonight. I really appreciate the depth, and I think we're getting into some operational weeds conversation. As I know, looking around my council table, I know we're breaking off in our own councils, and we'll have an opportunity to go into more context with our representative from Huronia Airport. From my lens, Your Worship, I'd recommend we end the presentation. We go into our own council sessions now. I want to thank everyone for their participation. On behalf of our council for the details tonight from the representatives.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a good wrap up. Of course, we will be able to avail ourselves independently of our folks who gave the presentation tonight. So this would be a good time. Then we'll take a 5-minute recess, and we'll let everybody join their appropriate streams. And I want to thank our partners for joining us tonight and helping us host this joint information Q&A session. I think everyone benefits when we're together asking these tough questions. So we'll adjourn for 5 minutes. Thank you, everybody, and welcome back. I'm sorry for those that were watching in real time. That was the longest 5 minutes ever. We had some great moment of break, I guess, but at any rate, sorry, we're back now. And I have a motion moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Prost, and it's a lengthy one following that information session we just came out of. So I will wet my whistle here and get through it all. And try not to block the camera. Sorry about that, camera. Whereas the Huronia Airport Commission has requested approval to sell up to 61.4 acres of the airport's East Field Airport lands for the purpose of supporting the airport's capital needs. And whereas item 13 of the Huronia Airport Agreement dated October 30th, 2000 provides the ability of the Huronia Airport Commission to sell airport lands subject to the approval of the participating municipalities. And whereas the Corporation of the Town of Midland is a participating municipality within the Huronia Airport Agreement dated October 30th of 2000. And whereas the sale of airport lands for the purpose of supporting the airport's capital needs will help reduce the financial impact on the ratepayers of the Corporation of the Town of Midland relating to the operation of the airport. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Midland hereby grants the Huronia Airport Commission the authority to sell up to 61.4 acres, of the airport's East Field Airport lands for the purpose of supporting the airport's capital needs. That is the motion on the floor, and I will open it up for discussion. And kick it off with Councillor McDonald. I saw the eyebrows.
I'm in support of the motion. I don't see any negative impact. And I appreciate the fact that it will relieve the Midland taxpayers of continuing to supplement their capital needs. And the enthusiasm that the possibilities that it will bring to the area. I guess I'm encouraged by it, so I'll be supporting the motion. And so move if you need a mover.
Thanks. We've got it on the floor here already. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Prost? Yeah, I saw the mic swing and I'm doing all kinds of body language reading instead of hands up tonight, so go ahead.
You're very quick tonight. What if we reduce that 61.1 acres to what's for sale right now? What the offer is for the 7 acres or 6.6 acres? To see how that works.
Mr. Campbell?
Through your worship to Councillor Prost. One of the challenges is this is a common recommendation in front of all 3 councils. So there's if it's amended here but not at the other municipalities, then it fails this endeavor. Also, at this point, the Airport Commission is only asking for the 60 acres. So whether the commission would even recommend a lesser amount, again, that's a question for your commission to be put to them. And I think one of the challenges, the goal here is to give the Airport Commission the ability to raise money to reduce property tax. So I question, why would you give them less of an opportunity to raise money by reducing the opportunity to sell land? So there's just some overarching, and I think the other comment just I'd like to make, they've talked about a number of interests in the airport, and if council goes down a road either by not approving this recommendation or trying to get an amendment to reduce the sale of land, all that is doing is telling those potential people, go elsewhere. So you're scared. We've got people interested in helping us raise cash. We need to watch what we say, otherwise we're just giving that competitive advantage to someone else.
Follow up?
Yeah, I just have one question. Do all 3 councils have to approve or not approve for this to go through?
Yes, it needs to be unanimous.
Councillor Emeritus?
Thank you, Mayor Gordon. I think the reason for Council Prost's thoughts are, and I share the same ones, is if we give up 60 acres and we're not going to scare people away, because right now there's nothing for sale. So if we limit it to, because it did change, it did go for, I believe, from 20 acres to 61 acres. It did change. So if we give up the 60 acres, the green light, I'd be comfortable on seeing how this, if we were to sell 20 acres or this 7.6, whatever that one parcel, to see how that transaction went, how that affected the tax rate. There's a lot of questions that, the people watching tonight, including myself, were kind of up in the air. There aren't any numbers to do any type of financial impact to the taxpayer. So by giving it a smaller acreage, I think that's the benefit of not opening the door right to the full 60. And if everything goes smoothly, and I'm sure it will, and I'm hopeful that it will reduce you know, the burden on the taxpayer and get that to the, you know, down to 242 or less, like Oshawa is paying, then great, we'll sell more. But I think that is the angle that Councillor Prost and myself are concerned about. Thank you.
I think we'll just remind if we can't really modify this, or we scuttle the whole deal. So we're really, I mean, we can muse about what it would be like if it was different, but the commission, which, you know, to be fair to the commission, I now sit on, I got to put my commission hat on for a second, ruminated about what this motion was going to look like to bring to our 3 funding partners and owners. And this is what was come up with. So it's not really, I know this feels like, you know, the snowblower again. This isn't really a debatable thing about, oh, we'll give them this, but not that. This is the ask that's before us, all 3 partners. And that's part of the joy of having a partnership, that we don't, we can't all go off in our own way. We need to sing together on the same sheet, on the same key, and at the same cadence, and make sure we're singing the same verse, which feels limiting and frustrating and restrictive. I get that, but Mr. Campbell, do you have anything to add? Because I think this is an important point, that we don't wander down the path of trying to modify this, even though our hearts may tell us otherwise.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that everyone recognize the commission is an animal, or, you know, the members on it are members of this council and other councils. The you know, I don't believe the commission will run amok and just go sell everything. So if the caution that, you know, if you were to approve this, and you also, you know, told the mayor as a member on that council that be prudent in how you sell it, and the commission maybe consider X, Y, and Z outside of this recommendation, that's the fiduciary controls that you have around who you appoint and how you give direction to that commission. So, you know, the fact that right now we have a legal requirement of, can they sell property or not? That's a decision that has to be made. The board of directors, that commission of which the mayor is a member and the other mayor is a member, it's up to them to be prudent how they use that and use their discretion with that ability that you've given them. You know, and, you know, the mayor, you know, can appoint different people to the commission, you know, that might have some other fiduciary controls they want to do as a member of that commission. But when the mayor is sitting as a commission member, he has to think of the best interest of the commission, which is the best interest of the town, which is, how do we make the most money we can to make our operations effective and efficient? And right now they're asking, how can they raise money to reduce tax levy? Full stop. Whether, even if they only raised $1, it's $1 less on the taxpayer. We're not talking, you know, that's a facetious thing to say $1, but, you know, we know they're going to need $500,000 to $1 million of capital to repair their assets. Same asset questions we have for roads and parks and everything else. You know, I've already been here talking about selling town land to help offset that, and you've had that debate. The airport's doing the exact same thing, except, you know, there's no one saying they you know, don't want to sell that land, you know, because of they want it as a park.
You just had to get a park dig in there. God love you. Mr. Wilcox, did you have anything to add before I go to Councillor Ball?
Thank you. It just took me a second to unmute there, and I'm very familiar with council process. So I think in theory, someone needs to ask me if I wish to comment on that, because I do wish to comment if you wish to hear.
Yes, thank you. The purpose of you being on this call, just for clarity, is you're one of the 3 presenters, and you're here to help make sure that we're not mischaracterizing what we just learned and through the Q&A session in the presentation, and we're moving ahead with the right facts.
Yeah, so I think on that point, you are correct. The commission has asked you for 61.4 acres, and you have the ability to say yes or no to that. That's it's within the agreement that you can sell land subject to the approval of the partner municipality. So that's their ask, and as been mentioned, you don't really have the ability to change that. I will say my recommendation to the commission was to sell airport land, period, full stop, potentially all 365 acres, so that 15 years from now, when this land is exhausted and they need to have a bigger conversation, perhaps about the west side, they would not have to come back to council. The commission, I think, wisely chose to limit it to the east field, which is easily developable land. So I think they did have a good debate about the size of the entity. The other thing to keep in mind is if you're going to encourage investors here, they're going to want to know the whole strategy for the east side. So if you're trying to parcel it off and only have 20 acres, it's kind of like being half pregnant. It doesn't work. You're either all in or you're all not in. And I think the 60-acre strategy does exactly that. It allows a future investor or a current investor to see what the Huronia Airports Commission's vision for the airport is, right? This lays out a vision for about 60 acres, and it's important to be able to see the full vision as opposed to having something behind the curtain. And that's what this does. It lays out a fulsome vision, and that's why the commission has come forward with this ask. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A lot of parallels to another debate we started and that we'll continue at our next meeting about planning. Councillor Bull.
Thank you, Your Worship. So right now, because of all the agreements that we have in place with the airport and all the municipalities, this land, we do not really have any power over it right now anyways. It's doing nothing for us. Allowing them to sell this land and having the people there right now, there's people that are leasing those hangars. They've built those hangars with their own money. They've already invested in the airport and they're looking to buy what's underneath them so that they can own that property instead. I think that that's already a source of revenue that we don't have now. We're not getting any tax revenue from this, which is an entire conversation in itself that I think we need to obviously address in the future. We're selling all this land. We need to be giving it back to our residents, as well as I know fuel is bounced around a lot as a revenue source. I actually had the pleasure of speaking to a pilot that has landed at our airport, and his fuel cost was $7. That's how much he spent at our airport. So that's not, to me, an accurate representation of those small aircrafts. I know we're getting into this again with Councillor Meredith, talking about different strategies for operational costs, but I think that we need to look at that whole picture as this is an actual revenue source that is in front of us. And right now, we are not getting anything off the land. Selling that land at least gives back to the operational costs of the airport, the capital budget, and then you do reduce the rate on the taxpayer, essentially. So that's not including the geopark, which obviously will come into fruition later if it goes through. Right now, there are people that are leasing the land already, and that's a source right there that's almost immediate. So I think that's something to consider.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Fair comment. Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, thank you, Your Worship. What I've heard so far tonight, I think really is leaning towards an investment, but looking at it being self-sustaining. The dollars that are generated will be used for capital. If we were to advance this for the future and create new opportunities, there's more revenue coming in for what the next steps are for requirements for the ask. And I think basically it's those steps of understanding what those needs are for the airport is next to look at using the dollars for potential expansion of the runway. There's only a certain amount of level of planes that can come in. How do we increase that? And that's an investment in capital. And if you increase that from a business perspective, you may open the doors for new opportunities that is self-sufficient moving towards that. So it's not going to be a burden the taxpayers for increase in capital projects. And I can see this in terms of a smart planning, but it needs to be thought out in the process of this particular sale for long term. And I think that's kind of what the benefit would be if we were to move in this direction and support the sales. So there's a bit of a, I guess, more of a continuous audit by the commission to ensure that their planning is targeted in the right direction. I think our representative on that would have a say with that. And I think that's what we have to look at on the long-term visioning. And if we were not to do anything, we're going to be caught up with the same situation on a yearly basis, with the ask to fund this and fund that. I think it's the opportunities that would come out of this. I think there needs to be a revised strategic approach to being more business oriented in terms of what the benefits will be of this particular sale and where will it lead to self-sufficiency. And I think that's kind of the aspect I would be looking at if there was some kind of a guarantee to say this is exactly what our plans. I kind of heard it, but I didn't catch any new aspects. It's great to have money coming in. It's how you utilize that funds for the benefit of the airport. So that's just my only thoughts on that.
Thanks. Anyone else have any questions or comments? Councillor Bald.
All right, thank you very much. There's been talk about prior poor decisions about this issue. And now we're not able to change those decisions. And it's very unfortunate. It sounds like the commission wasn't really looked after properly. It has a long history. But now that our mayor, Mayor Gordon, is on the board now, and hopefully he will be able to steward the airport and the land there, so that we'll be able to continue and grow with the Huronia airport. So before I came here today, I was thinking that I was not going to vote for that. However, we're in a hard place, and I think that with the mayor on the board now, I have some hope that the commission will be able to deal with things more much better, and also work on other things that will help both Midland and the other two, Tay and Penetang. So those are my, I'm very reluctant to say that I'm going to agree with this, but it's something that has built up over the years that we have no real, we're not responsible for that, but we have to be realistic. And so basically I'm going to agree to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the vote of confidence, but I'll just reiterate that, you know, I may be your rep on here. We have 2 reps from the town of Midland also that we've appointed. And I don't act as me, just myself. I bring this council's concerns, the residents' concerns, and quite frankly, even the concerns of folks that I spoke to on the break who aren't Midland residents, although they have business in Midland and have very real concerns about noise, the aquifer, just, you know, building on the use of the airport and how it's could potentially impact or is impacting neighbors. So the fact that I may be on the commission with a vote and a voice, I'm there bringing the collective input from my team here in Midland to that commission table, as well as the input that I hear from residents, both of Midland and residents that I also represent on behalf of the other 2 partner municipalities. So don't think that your input ends on this vote and that it's restricted only to times when we're arguing the budget yearly. My intention and my goal is to make sure that Midland's wants, wishes, and needs are brought through and form part of the discussion that happens at those commission meetings. So that's my pledge to you to do that and continue to do that. Even things that I learned, like just having a sidebar chat today on our 12-minute, 5-minute break. So anyway, for what it's worth, I appreciate the vote of confidence, but you know, again, I'll reiterate my phrase I like to use. I'm not the king of Midland, and I do this only because you let me, and I will continue to do that and advance this business mindedness that really sounds like Midland's pushing for to extract more value out of the airport. So that's all I can say there. Long-winded answer, saying thank you. Mr. Wilcox, I see your little yellow hand up. Did you have anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor, and the previous councillor there. I think you made a really, we'll call it a sage observation. I think the airport did lament for quite some time. And whatever the watershed moment was, it happened a few years ago, and they started with the Lumax study. So however that came to be, and then the WSP study, and then bringing me on board, those are really key pieces to begin to think about the airport like a business, and how it can best benefit the member municipalities. And so however that occurred, I think it's in a very good place. I think the governance works now. Mayor, I was smiling when you were speaking because you said differently what I said earlier. The airport is here to serve you, and you need to make sure your voice is heard, and then it goes in a direction you need to take it. And Mayor, you made the commitment to your council today to do that. So thank you for that. On behalf of your residents there, I think that's a great initiative, because that's what needs to be done, is continue to be active. And I think they've done some really good things. Prior to 2008, that's what we did. We did all of that really heavy lifting, the big thinking about where is it going, and made sure we continued with that strategy. So I think you're off to a good start. And the enabling of the sale of land really gives the commission the ability to do some great things with the airport on your behalf. And quite honestly, it's beside you guys. You will be the greatest benefactors of this, right? And that's why you have 50% and 3 people on the commission, because sink or swim, the airport has the biggest impact on you. The Wyerton example was mentioned, and that's a horrible, horrible choice. Imagine when the owner of that property decides that it's better for development, because airports are never the highest and best use. In infrastructure model, you need to have them. What are they going to do with their air ambulance? And they're going to have no control. So being involved, keeping your 3 seats, and enabling the commission to do things are the very best that you can do for your community. And so thank you, Mayor, for your commitment to do that. And again, I just think this is a great initiative moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions, Deputy Mayor?
It's not really a question. I think it's just something for consideration for future. I think, I've heard this evening from Councillor Meredith to re-looking at the bylaws, and I think these are future things we need to look at. We need to look at, the future agreements that we have with, compared to the existing ones, because I think it limits our opportunity, but I think it needs to be revisited. So we ensure that there's transparency, but it's also making the right decisions by having the right tools to make those decisions. And I have many trust with the commission, but the commission also is limited to what they can do, because they need the approval from 3 councils to move forward. So I think those are kind of the tools that we need to relook at in the future to ensure the integrity of what the airport is going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years. We're just looking at an opportunity today, but there may be other opportunities, but it's better to have the right tools to do the job. So that might be something to consider if we're going to move forward with this.
Thank you. Well, very good. Yeah, I think we've bounced in. Oh, Mr. Will, I was just going to call the question, Mr. Wilcox, unless you have some sort of germane response that maybe needs to happen.
I think really just, I think both the deputy mayor and Councillor Emeritus raised the point. There's lots of opportunities going forward to look at how you participate within the agreement. And all agreements are fluid in nature. In other words, they need to change and improve as time goes on. And I think if I put on a hat where I'm looking at your perspective, I think those are prudent things to do. The Huronia Airport Commission is really beginning to hit its stride. And I think good, solid involvement, making sure that it continues to move forward and support your municipality is going to be really key, and reviewing the current agreement for other opportunities to manage that are going to be beneficial. So really good things for future conversations. Thank you for indulging me.
Great. So with that, I know Councillor Downer couldn't be with us tonight. He's still recovering, and we're certainly wishing him well, but I know the airport is near and dear to his heart, and I'm not trying to use his name to influence his decision, but I do feel he's here in spirit with us tonight, probably watching on TV. And I know if I believe, and he can correct me later and if I'm wrong, but I believe if he was here, he would ask for a recorded vote on this. So I will ask for a recorded vote, but I just want to give the rationale where it's coming from. So for what it's worth, Madam Clerk, if I could ask you to call the question when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Worship. Members of council, you've heard the motion. When I call your name, please say yes or no. Deputy Mayor Compton,
Yes.
Councillor East,
Yes.
Councillor Ball, yes. Councillor Bald, Councillor Prost,
No.
Councillor McDonald,
Yes.
Councillor Meredith,
No.
and Mayor Gordon.
Yes.
The motion is carried 6-2.
All right. Thank you very much, Council. There was a lot of conversation, a lot of input, and a lot of contemplation. So I appreciate all the questions and the concern, and the fact that this wasn't a quick decision or an easy one. All right, I am going to move on to section 6 on the agenda. Section 6.1. This is a even longer motion than the last one I had to read. So I'm going to take another sip of water and try and pound through this one without tripping over my tongue.
You can, you don't have to read the whole thing. You could say as written and presented if you wish.
That would be most welcome. For those following along, you can click the hyperlink and read this beast. But perhaps we'll start with the, we'll let staff speak to this. This is before us, and I'll even let staff speak to why it's before us, but it is rather lengthy, and it stems from a negotiated agreement, which I'm always happy to hear. Compromises and negotiations. Big thumbs up. So I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll introduce Tim Kane. He's been the planner we've hired to assist staff in wrapping up this file. So he's here to speak to this, and also the developers and planner is also here in the audience, Jamie Robinson. So I'll ask Tim to just summarize the report details.
Please, thank you. And actually, just before we do, to get this on the floor, I neglected to say that this motion is moved by Councillor East and seconded by Councillor Ball. There's the long part that I'm going to skip over for now, and I'll turn the mic over for our presenter. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. It's been a while since I've been in a chair like this, so it's good to be here tonight and talking to you about this report. And Andy or Mr. Campbell did comment on the length of the resolution, so I'm glad he gave you a reprieve from having to read that out. The reason for the length is just because there is about 7 reports in one crafted into this planning report. And it's not to overcomplicate things. It's simply to reflect, what's been quite a long process, and one that, has many details, quite frankly, that, staff have been working hard, and the applicant as well to work through those to get this project towards fruition. So just looking at the report now, I can briefly go down. As you've noticed, maybe already if you reviewed it, it's structured in a way that, there's a separate section in the report for each resolution to try and break it down and make it more easier to digest. Probably the biggest resolution here tonight is just the development agreement itself. So this is the document that operationalizes or implements the previous direction the council gave through the draft plan approval. And there's a number of bullet points summarizing what is captured in that agreement to make sure that this development turns out as intended. And, there's accompanying resolution there later on too that speaks to, giving staff some flexibility, your staff flexibility in terms of, crossing the T's and dotting the I's as some of those final discussions take place with that agreement. That's quite lengthy, but at the same time comprehensive to ensure that the town's interests are protected and ensure that the developer is on the right track to get its development in the ground. The second resolution on here refers to, sorry, I'm just looking, the holding provision on the site. As you may or may not know, there is a planning tool on the site called a holding provision. So essentially that basically means that no use can occur other than what's there now, which is just a vacant piece of land, that no use can occur without certain conditions being met and conditions being lifted. So that resolution is in here as well to basically lift off that holding provision, in particular on the west side of the site. That's the site that we're mainly talking about tonight that we're giving the go ahead to go forward on. We are registering the whole subdivision or the whole phase 2 of that subdivision, don't get me wrong. But the idea and the way that this report's been structured and the development agreement is to allow that west half to go forward first. That's the simpler part, that's the ground related townhouses in that section of phase 2. That can proceed after tonight if this report is successful, with homework to be done on the eastern half of the site. And that's the side of the site that has higher density on it with a future apartment block on there. So there's still some moving pieces there. That's a more complex piece of the puzzle that we're working on. And the developers agreed to continue to work with staff on that piece. So the go ahead tonight, if this is successful, is allowing the whole subdivision to register, but not allowing the eastern half to construct, just allowing the western portion to go ahead and move forward. The third resolution is more of a mechanics and transactional matter, just regarding the 1 foot reserves that exist. So these 0.3 meter reserves have been put in place as part of the first agreement, as part of this one, just to ensure that access is controlled to the site. Once this agreement is entered into and a commitment's made, then those reserves can be lifted off and the risk is gone from the town. The fourth resolution is regarding the site plan control on the site. So the site plan control bylaw basically requires another level of approval or another layer of approval on these lands because of the higher density residential nature of them. In this case, though, because we're dealing with the west block, which is the lower density portion, and the development agreement's been structured in a way that all of those things that the town would be looking at anyway as part of that site plan approval have been captured in that existing development agreement that's in place for the western block. So on that basis, there's no need to double up on the approval and have 2 agreements essentially saying the same thing. So we're asking that the site plan control bylaw that applies to the entire site be lifted on that west portion of the site that is captured by the development agreement here that's being considered tonight. And that the site plan approval process continue to apply to that more complex piece on the east side as those details are finalized moving forward. The resolution number 5 is referring to the urban design architectural control guidelines. So these are the guidelines that basically dictate the look and feel of that property. Again, on the west half, we're satisfied that they are accomplishing that. They're reflecting what we've seen in phase 1, which quite frankly is a nice development. They're continuing that on, and that's reflected in what the requirements are for phase 2. So those guidelines have been considered by staff. They've been incorporated into the approved plans that the engineering department and parks people have looked at. So that is captured through that 5th resolution that I just spoke to. Also, as part of that, and part and parcel, again, referring to the East Block, there is a section of that urban design guideline study that's refers specifically to the Eastern Block of the development site. So again, because those details are still being negotiated and still being discussed proactively with the applicant and with the developer, resolution number 6 gives us the opportunity for staff to basically determine when it's sufficient that those guidelines have been satisfied so that they can be applied to that future site plan process that I described. Resolution 7, that's a street naming process following council's street naming policy. It was previously drafted as a staff report, but was never brought forward just because it wasn't the time for it. And now that we are in the final throes of this process, we decided to add that process to this report. So you see the street names being proposed in that regard. And then finally, resolutions 8 and 9, they basically speak to the mechanics of this and all these moving pieces that I've been describing. So, number 8 is to, it's that double check, council's giving us direction to move forward and do those final details. And those details won't be signed off on until the staff is completely satisfied that everything is in place and proper. As long as it's in the spirit and intent of this report and the general direction of this report, staff will continue to work under that umbrella to finalize those documents. And then number 9 is could possibly be an option, but it's sitting in there as a resolution, is that quite often, some resolutions will go forward and others, are rightfully held back or some are refused. In this case, what staff is asking for, what we're recommending is that because this has been orchestrated as one set of approvals, if council isn't comfortable with one of the recommendations, is that, all of the recommendations be considered as one entity for the purpose of this report. If there is, concerns or things that you want us to come back with, then we'd ask that the whole thing be deferred and certain resolutions not move forward, just on the basis to make sure that we're not, I don't know, trying to think of a good expression for it, just to make sure that we aren't tripping over ourselves by allowing something to go ahead when other options or other mechanisms aren't in place. So sorry for the long introduction, but it's not the most simple report, and I'm certainly here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate the detail on each of these many resolutions. I really just have one question to kick things off with, namely because I'm staring at the future owners of one of the homes, of the many beautiful homes that are going to be built in that development. What barriers, if any, remain if we were to pass this tonight to the registration of Block 27 and the residents being able to take title and move into their homes?
Yes, so we're actually talking with this today. There are, the development agreement recognizes that block specifically. I did become aware of the history of that block. So as of this morning, even in a meeting, we're recommending that, the developer / builder, approach the building department to initiate those final inspections for the building. That occupancy permit that would be ultimately needed would be relying on some of the things that are being addressed here in this report tonight in order for those units to ultimately be occupied. So in terms of timeline, it would be up to the applicant. There are things that have to be registered, things that have to be reviewed by lawyers. So I will have to get back to council that unless I'm looking at the applicant's planner if they have any idea what that might be. I'm sorry.
Why don't you come up to the podium? It's good to hear from both sides. I'm really happy that you guys will be able to work together to come to these resolutions. It's been a bit of a path to get here.
Sure. No doubt. Thank you, Your Worship. My name is Jamie Robinson. I'm the planning consultant for the applicants. I don't have a specific time on how quickly it can happen, but certainly I know final occupancy. First off, it has to be registered in final occupancy, but we're basically ready to act on those items as soon as possible. We thank staff and we thank Tim and Andy and their crew for all their efforts in working to get us to this point. And we've all spent a lot of time. I think the only comment I'd like to make while I'm here is that you've got a lot of professionals, you've got a lot of lawyers on both sides looking at this stuff. And I think at the end of the day, you're in good hands and you should be satisfied with that. We certainly are with the approach that's been taken most recently. I think staff is too. And I just urge you to approve these resolutions so we can get on with building homes in Midland. That's what this is about. So thanks.
Thank you very much. I think Mr. Ford agrees with you. Just doesn't want to fund a bunch of it, but anyway, it's my little poke for the night. I always try and get one in for him. All right, council, any questions about these recommendations? Councillor McDonald.
Just in regards to block 27, can we stipulate that we'll pass this once the occupancy is awarded?
Through your worship to Councilor McDonald, it's chicken and the egg. You know, the resolutions tonight is what, as Mr. As Jamie mentioned, are to basically facilitate that path to occupancy occurring. So, you know, for us to withhold this until the occupancy takes place, it'd be nice to keep their feet to the fire in block 27. But I think the more effective path will be, you know, allowing these hurdles to be crossed tonight if council so decides. And then that's going to open the door to expediting the occupancy of block 27.
There is no way of putting a time limit. You have so many days.
Through your worship, this file, as you know, it has been through a lot with this council and the previous council. We've tried to give a path to the developer, at least on 2 other occasions, to get to registration and get these homeowners moved in. So we've been working on doing our part, and the developer to date has chosen not to take the opportunities that we have given them. This is everything that we can give them so that they could register a drawing potentially next week, so that the land can be divided. So for us to try and put a time frame in here, I think would only complicate things right now. I think we have to, if council chooses pass these resolutions, the developer, our lawyer, their lawyer, have some wording changes to finish up. And I hope everybody can do that in the next few days. And then once they submit drawings for registration, that might be a 30 to 30-day process, but that's a provincial thing, not us anymore. I hope council doesn't want to put any other conditions on this, because I'm not sure it would get us anywhere faster, because just given the history of this file.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, or Mayor Gordon, I should say. I can appreciate the hours of work that have gone into this file before it was brought to us. I trust administration, and I have faith that it will happen sooner than later, whether it's the chicken or the egg, but it's got to happen. It's an embarrassment that it hasn't happened before this point for both the developer and the town.
I look forward to that photo op where we can all stand there and smile, the keys dangling in front of the Hicks and their neighbors. So I think we all do. Everyone wants this thing to keep going. Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Mayor Gordon. So I think that, yes, like Mr. Campbell said, we have worked with them. We've given them the opportunity to give us those things. So It is what it is. That hasn't gone forward. It has, but I'm hoping that we approving all of these will show that we as the council are on our homeowners side and we are trying our very best to move it forward. And I'm going to leave it with the developer and say, please, we're working with you. Please work with us. Please work with our homeowners that are patiently been here for weeks. So I hope that every confidence that we push this through and that will help them and they will want to work with us in the future and work with the homeowners. So I hope that is going to happen. I have faith.
All right, I guess I'll call the question then. We've had our discussion, council. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that is carried. Thank you very much. I appreciate your sitting through all the airport stuff tonight. Hopefully that wasn't, hopefully it was entertaining and educating at the same time. There's certainly big decisions happening in this room tonight. All right. Well, I have the next motion moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Prost, of bylaw 2023-17, being a bylaw to adopt the proceedings of the special meeting of council held March 30th, 2023 be passed and enacted. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. And last but not least, moved by Deputy Mayor Conton, seconded by Councillor Ball, that the special meeting of council adjourn at 8:55 p.m. All those in favor? Opposed? And it's carried. Thank you. We stand adjourned.